Chapter 821, The Northern Line II. Nsiwe obeyed, and the two rode the wind down, swiftly passing over rows of orderly buildings under the chill of late winter. A trail of scattered lights led them to a small house in town where they stopped. The house was far from luxurious, it was just a simple dwelling. The roof tiles were blackened, some even cracked and unrepaired. Li Ziming had been delayed for quite some time, and it was already deep into the night. The couple had gone to the bedroom. He stood atop the roof, staring at a particular crack, and didn't move. With the enhanced hearing of a Foundation Establishment Realm cultivator, he could hear everything clearly from the rooftop, including his daughter-in-law's voice. Now that we have someone to rely on, Minger's future cultivation path will surely be smoother. Li Ziming slightly lifted his chin at those words. Exactly. Li Chengzhen's tone was no longer soft or submissive. There was a trace of pride in his voice as he spoke craftily. Besides, father has no one close to him. The North keeps calling for reinforcements, and I heard we just lost again. Surely another round of conscription is coming. Alchemists are known to be poor at combat, right? Think about it. If we get lucky and something happens to him in the North, all his possessions will go to Zhuming. No need to split it further. The woman beside him suddenly gasped in realization. Husband. What brilliant thinking. The estate of a Foundation Establishment Realm alchemist, who knows how many elixirs and pills he's got. Maybe even Foundation Establishment Realm Dharma artifacts. The couple discussed delightedly, while Nsiwe listened with sweat forming on his brow. His expression grew darker with every word. On the other hand, Li Ziming remained calm. He raised a hand to stop him, then took flight without looking back, heading toward the mountain. The moon hung bright in the sky, its silver glow falling across his face. Li Ziming waved his hand. No need to report this to the family chief. Let me be the heartless one first. I can't blame others. Wishing for my death is only human. As for double-faced words, honeyed speech, veiled daggers, and scheming for gain, he said softly, my father taught me the same way. He won't need his father to teach him. After a few rounds in the mortal world, he'll figure it out himself. Perhaps he'll be better than I was. By the shores of Moongaze Lake, Li Xiaowei descended on the wind and landed on the lakeside. The snow atop Moongaze Lake had melted, and early spring greenery was spreading along the shore, painting a pleasant scene. In the end, Su Peiyu was merely a concubine. He buried her at the foot of Lijiang Mountain. The guards and maids were strictly watched, and no word had leaked out. Li Jianghao's birth, too, remained a silent affair, known only to a few from Qingdu. He walked along the shore for a while, slowly settling his thoughts. He hadn't truly loved Su Peiyu. Bright yang blood often seduced others, and those with weak wills fell quickly into carnal desire. He had thought himself generous by giving her the status and life she wanted. She'd lived contentedly, and yet died suddenly because of all this. As Li Xiaowei continued walking, someone came forward to report. Nsiwe's voice was low and heavy. Your Highness, someone from the north has arrived again. Though Nsiwe was normally reserved, he had reason to be upset. His father and Jian had just gone missing in the north, and cultivators like Chen Mufeng, Li Wen, and Li Minggong had all vanished. Now the Azure Pond sect had sent someone again, likely to conscript more. Li Xiaowei had expected it. It had only arrived later than he'd thought. He lifted himself on the wind and asked, who did they send? Where is Zhao Tingui? Nsiwe descended into the mountain with him and replied, the envoy calls himself Ning Heiyuan. It's him. When Li Xiaowei reached the front of the hall, he could already hear Li Xuanxuan's polite voice from afar. The elder offered pleasantries, to which Ning Heiyuan replied with a laugh, Elder, you are too kind. I visited your esteemed family once before when I was young and brash. I even crossed hands with Taoist King Hung back then. Li Xiaowei stepped sideways into the hall. Li Ziming had yet to arrive, so he stood off to the side. Ning Heiyuan glanced at him briefly, then took a second, longer look. He quietly mused to himself, this must be the heir of the Li family. I've heard his cultivation talent rivals even Li Ziming's and has the temperament and means to match, though at a glance, he appears bold and overbearing more than anything. Though calculations churned in his mind, he didn't show it, and instead smiled as he spoke. Back then, a single sword strike slew Foundation Establishment Realm cultivator from the Fei family. The sect sent my aunt to investigate, and I came along for the visit. I was still quite ignorant in those days. His words were sincere and carried a weight of reminiscence. Then he shifted the topic with a sigh. Tang Shedu acted decisively and handed us a crushing defeat along with the fall of Mount Yan Pass. Thankfully, my brother-in-law came through unharmed. He should be following behind a Taoist master now, or perhaps even seizing some new fortune. So senior, there's no need for worry. The tension in Li Xuanxuan's heart eased significantly. At that moment, Li Ziming entered the hall. Ning Heiyuan greeted him politely, then asked quietly, have Zijai or King Hung returned yet? Li Xuanxuan silently shook his head. Ning Heiyuan's heart sank as he thought, troublesome. Then Li Xuanxuan countered with a question, now that Mount Yan Pass has fallen. What of Zhao Tingui and the others? Tingui died in battle. My Moonlake Peak lost over half its forces, including 3 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators. Ning Heiyuan's tone was grave. Clearly, Moonlake Peak had suffered devastating losses in the affair. Though they still had many contingencies, they could not protect as thoroughly as when Yuan Su lived. Still, it was better than Yunwu Peak, thought Ning Heiyuan. Ning Heiyuan paused before continuing. The sect has formed a new defensive line along the southern bank of the Great River. Considering your family suffered significant losses, only Ximing is required to go among the Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators. However, since your family still has ample Qi Cultivation Realm cultivators, we'll need to draw several of them. Before the three could respond, he took a jade box from his robe and presented it, saying, "The sect also offers compensation." He opened the box in front of them, revealing two glistening, perfectly round, pure white pills. A wave of rich fragrance burst forth as soon as the box opened. Essence Gathering Pill. These pills were all too familiar. They were highly coveted by countless families and used to aid in Foundation Establishment Realm cultivation. Li Ximing gave them a quick glance, while Li Xuanxuan stroked his beard in thoughtful silence. Ning Heiyuan spoke gently. The sect master has ordered that every Foundation Establishment Realm cultivator lost among the major families be compensated 1-to-1 with an essence gathering. King Hung had earned some merit before, and since your family suffered losses at Mount Yan Pass, 2 pills are granted to your family first. He cupped his hands respectfully and said, "If any of your Foundation Establishment Realm direct descendants have perished in the north, once verified, the sect will likewise provide additional essence gathering pills in compensation." Chapter 822, Sixfold Profound Thunder Punishment Tokens. Li Ximing and Li Xuanxuan were both slightly surprised. Ning Heiyuan then took out a long jade box from his hand and said softly, "As for this item, it is a gift from my Moonlake Peak to your esteemed family, and also a token of sincerity from the Ning family." He opened the jade box, revealing 6 neatly arranged command tokens that emitted a silvery glow. The moment the box was opened, there was a sudden crackling explosion. Crackle. Li Xuanxuan looked closely. Each of the 6 tokens bore a unique pattern and brimmed with silvery lightning. Thunder Punishment aura surged out, interwoven with dazzling silver light. Ning Heiyuan said softly, "This item was originally a treasured possession of Taoist Master Yuan Su of our family. It was obtained from the Eastern Sea and is called the Sixfold Profound Thunder Punishment Tokens. It is a rare complete set among Foundation Establishment Realm Dharma artifacts. Since King Hung cultivates thunder arts, I found this set to send." Li Ximing understood at a glance that this Dharma artifact was no ordinary item. The Ning family had indeed paid a heavy price. Ning Heiyuan solemnly continued, "It is said this set of Dharma artifacts is several centuries old. The Taoist master mentioned it was modeled after the 6-fold quaking profound thunder tokens, which were themselves derived from the Tao of thunder steering and cloud dwelling. It holds many marvelous applications. The one who crafted these artifacts must have studied the original 6-fold quaking profound thunder tokens and grasped some of their subtleties. However, limited by his own abilities, he failed multiple times. It took 6 attempts in total for him to complete it. Later, the creator reworked those 6 tokens and finally produced this current set, the 6-fold profound thunder punishment tokens." Li Ximing examined them for a while. Ning Heiyuan then hesitated and said, "I just don't know how King Hung is doing now. Our peak also doesn't have any bright Yang Dharma artifacts suitable for Ximing. After much searching, only this set of 6-fold profound thunder punishment tokens seemed appropriate." Ning Heiyuan laid out the benefits clearly, then continued to try and persuade them. "Furthermore, your esteemed family lies just north of Yue. If the Great River cannot be held, Moongaze Lake is next. Stationing forces there isn't just for the sake of Moon Lake and the Azure Pond sect, but for your family's own protection as well." The Li family had no real power to refuse. Ning Heiyuan had given solid benefits and clearly explained the pros and cons. What words of rejection could Li Xuanxuan still offer? He could only look up at Li Ximing. Li Ximing merely nodded heavily and replied, "I will obey the order." "Good, good, good." Ning Heiyuan nodded and said softly, "Ximing, depart within 3 days. Your family must send 5 late-stage Qi Cultivation Realm cultivators and 6 mid-stage Qi Cultivation Realm cultivators along with you. As for Embryonic Breathing Realm and early-stage Qi Cultivation Realm cultivators, your family may decide as you see fit. My task is heavy and I still need to visit the next family. I won't delay further." He bowed respectfully and departed, riding. He left behind the 2 jade boxes in the hall. Li Ximing picked up the one containing the essence-gathering pills, examined it, and said, "The pattern doesn't resemble a human pill, nor does it match the Azure Ponsect's pill-refining techniques. It used a few demonic creatures, likely something Azure Ponsect acquired from elsewhere. It feels quite familiar." Li Xuanxuan looked up. After carefully examining it for a long while, Li Ximing exhaled softly and confirmed, "It's the Xiao family's method." Identifying the origin of a pill based on its refinement method was an incredibly difficult task. Li Ximing normally wouldn't have this ability, but he had studied under Xiao Yuanci and had seen all these techniques before. If my guess is right, this batch of essence-gathering pills was likely refined by Master, or perhaps even by Taoist master shooting himself. Li Xuanxuan put away the jade box containing the sixfold profound thunder punishment tokens and said slowly, "They've become generous now." Li Xiaowei exchanged a glance with him and said softly, "It's simply that Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators are too scarce in Jiangnan. They're urgently supplying the families with essence-gathering pills so the old family elders and younger Qi Cultivation Realm cultivators can attempt breakthroughs. Only then can the situation be stabilized by the new Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators." Li Xuanxuan voiced the concern first, but Qi Cultivation Realm cultivators. Their family no longer had as many Qi Cultivation Realm cultivators as before. When he calculated what manpower they had available, especially late-stage Qi Cultivation Realm cultivators, they were truly stretched thin. He continued, "Shamali is already at late stage, and Dong must go as well. If I include myself, we're still short by 2, Sai. Chenghui is still at the Eastern Sea and has also reached late-stage Qi Cultivation Realm by now. Let Chenghui and Qinglio go." Li Ziming let out a deep breath and said, "Chenghui's cultivation is still a bit lacking, but he can reach the late stage with a talisman pill." Only Qinglio, Minggong, Chenghui and Chenghui remained among Radiant Lure Generation's outstanding juniors. Now that Minggong's whereabouts were unknown, once they obeyed this conscription order, only Chenghui in the Eastern Sea would remain. Li Xiaowei watched for a moment, then sent people to make arrangements and carefully went over the name list. Inwardly he thought it truly is the end of a generation's strength. Eastern Sea. Li Zijia and his companions rode the water veins, weaving through the surging undercurrents of the sea. Li Quantao's waterwall pearl was exceptionally useful, gathering white water to form a giant sturgeon that sped through the current at incredible speed. Though severely injured, the Dharma artifact's radiance did not fade in the slightest. It even maintained a high-speed spell art on its own, clearly demonstrating the extraordinary marvels of this ancient Dharma artifact. Yu Yue is most likely dead, thought Li Zijia. Although Yu Yue didn't have many years left, Li Zijia hadn't expected him to stay behind to cover their retreat. Whatever the reason, they now owed the old man a debt of gratitude. Beside them, Li Quantao appeared dejected and distraught. After swallowing several pills, his complexion improved slightly, though anxiety still lingered on his face. As they traveled through the seawater, they gradually neared the shallow sea coast. Faint, thunderous rumbles could still be heard, most likely from cultivators engaged in battle above. From time to time, a streak of fierce and violent sword light slashed into the water, causing the water veins to tremble. This area was near Wanyu's Sword Gate, so it was likely the Sword Gate's disciples. The group was in poor condition and had no desire to stir trouble. They traveled swiftly with the current. They had originally planned to land at Lake Xian Dock under Profound Peak Gate's control. However, with the conflict between North and South, much of Lake Xian had already fallen into the hands of devil cultivators, forcing them to head further south. However, just as they emerged from the water vein, they discovered the surrounding waters were already tightly sealed off. Not only had the route from the Eastern Sea back to the inland been blocked, but a figure riding the wind immediately approached and shouted coldly, "Cultivators from which sect? Report your names. This is Wanyu Sword Gate's Raising Sword Fairy." Li Zijia actually felt more at ease at this. After all, the Sword Gate was a strict orthodox gate. Since they weren't devil cultivators, there was nothing to fear. He had previously encountered members of the Sword Gate who were openly hostile toward the Azure Pond sect but held a favorable impression of the Li family. So he was prepared enough to cup his hands in salute as he replied, "Cultivators of the Li family from Moongaze Lake, we request permission to pass through your ferry crossing." The Li family. Sure enough, the cultivator's tone on the other side softened slightly, though a heavy wariness remained as he said in a deep voice, "Do you have any credentials? Chunni and Crimson Reef have frequently raided our immortal islands recently. Our sect has tightened inspections, please forgive us." Credentials. Li Zijia was suddenly a bit embarrassed. After all, their family's name had limited renown, and showing their jade token would likely be meaningless. So he could only reply quietly, "I once had some acquaintance with Taoist Cheng Jinju. Might he be present now?" Chapter 823, Searching Taoist Jinju. The cultivator paused, speaking with some doubt. "Fellow Taoist, the Taoist has already gone to Spleetered Island, and there's no way to verify your identity at this time. What a pity." His tone wavered slightly, but fearing they had chosen this time precisely because Cheng Jinju wasn't present, he finally said in a firm voice, "Do the three of you have any other proof? I'm afraid I can't just let you through based on your words alone." Li Zijia immediately felt awkward. The Sword Gate most likely wouldn't give face to the Azure Pond sect. If he took out the Azure Pond sect jade token now, it would not only be ineffective, but the contradiction in actions would also arouse suspicion. He gripped his sword, just about to speak, when Li Qinghang behind him stepped forward. A streak of bright lightning appeared in her hand, purple and shimmering like a swimming fish. She spoke gracefully. I am Li Qingheng of Moongaze Lake. I cultivate the ancient art of the Thunder Dao. Might this serve as proof? The cultivator carefully examined the lightning in her hand and considered the details. At last, he relented and said after a moment's thought, since you're from the Li family, it's only right that our sword gate offers some assistance. I see all of you are injured. Several elders from our sect are heading to Wu State's great western plains. Why not travel with them and disembark at Moongaze Lake along the way? The sword gate truly acts with integrity, thought Li Zijai. How could Li Zijai not understand the arrangement? Since they didn't look like villains and their identity was still unverified, the sword gate was choosing to escort them all the way to the Li family. If they were devil cultivators in disguise, it would all be exposed the moment they met the real family. It was a sound plan, but quite troublesome for the sword gate. Li Zijai thought to himself that if it were him guarding the ferry crossing, he would have just turned them away. He wouldn't have gone to such lengths. Li Quanto nodded, having a good impression of the sword gate. He used a secret technique to transmit his voice and advised, Brother Zhai, the sword gate has been an upright gate for many years. They won't harm us. Then we'll trouble your sect. Li Zijai gave a nod in response. The cultivator's expression softened like spring-thawing ice, and he said gently, then follow me quickly. If we miss the scheduled time, that'll be a real problem. The group followed him across the ferry crossing. The refined architecture of Wanyu's sword gate had a distinctive sharpness, embodying the style of sword cultivators. The pavilions were connected by walkways, with eaves curving sharply upward, creating a striking scene. A large sword ship of the sect was anchored at the ferry dock. A sword cultivator, dressed in a simple black robe, stood in front of it with a bright white longsword strapped to his back. He had narrow eyes and long brows and was gazing westward. Martial uncle. The cultivator leading the group called out and quietly explained the situation. The elegant sword cultivator turned his head in surprise and asked, the Li family of Qingdu. He smiled faintly, the white sword on his back humming softly as he asked, I am Cheng Gao. It's been many years, I wonder how Brother Yunjiao is doing. He once said he'd visit if given the chance, but I've never heard from him. Li Zijai was startled to hear this and could only reply, my father perished in Mirage Mirror Heaven. It's been 18 years now. Cheng Gao paused briefly, then asked again, who killed him? Tang Shedu, muttered Li Zijai. Cheng Gao crossed his arms, observing Li Zijai for a breath before speaking, you're his son. Then there's no need to wait in the clouds, come aboard. He waved for the sword gate disciple to step back, led the group into the sword ship, and sat down by the table. Someone came forward to serve tea, and Cheng Gao spoke quietly. I had been cultivating my sword essence in the Eastern Sea for 20 years. I didn't expect so many things to happen during that time. It's truly a shame. Li Zijai wasn't sure how close Li Yunjiao had been with this man, so he refrained from speaking. Then he saw Cheng Gao exhale and say softly, now that Tang Shedu has been slain by Senior Chuanfeng's arrow, I suppose that karma has been resolved. Upon hearing this, Li Zijai felt as if a great burden had lifted from his heart and finally relaxed. Cheng Gao then asked, are all of you from the Li family? I am Li Qingheng, younger sister of Li Yunjiao. Li Qingheng replied gently. Cheng Gao nodded in a friendly manner, while Li Quanto, a bit embarrassed, said softly, Li Quanto, from Fuchin Peak of the Azure Pond sect. Cheng Gao had been pouring tea into a cup, but upon hearing this, he slowly raised his head, set the teapot down, and raised an eyebrow slightly. He asked, who is Li and Cheng to you? He is my father. Li Quanto's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. Cheng Gao nodded and said kindly, then we're all on the same side, no need to be so formal. Li Quanto straightened his back a little, his complexion visibly brightening. Cheng Gao glanced at him once again and said gently, Taoist Master Guangxu was once on good terms with our sword gate and often lent us support. Though your family joined the Azure Pond sect, the friendship remains. There's no need to stand on ceremony, Quanto. The others might not have understood earlier, but after Yu Wei's earlier hints, they quickly caught on, the Taoist master from Hongsu Gate. Li Quanto froze, gripping his cup tightly. Cheng Gao said gently, there's no need to react like that. No matter who it was, even the sword immortal Donghua wasn't perfect. Not everyone who besieged him back then was evil. Some entanglements aren't about right or wrong, but simply fate's mischief. His words were like a sudden awakening, causing Li Quanto's eyes to redden slightly as the pent-up frustration in his heart dissipated. He slowly took a sip of tea and asked, Senior, may I ask? What exactly happened to our family's Taoist master? Cheng Gao nodded gently and rested one hand on the table as he began to explain. Back then, the Changzhen wondrous arts were released when Donghua fell. All the things that had only existed in the great void with mana came tumbling down, glittering like a sky full of jewels. A great battle erupted over the lake, descending into chaos. Taoist Master Guangxu seized the immortal sword and secretly clutched it to his chest. He didn't dare return to his sect, nor did he dare to flee into the great void. He simply fled westward, toward Wu State. Cheng Gao's expression turned wistful as he spoke softly. It said that the sword was called Zuli. It was a true immortal sword. When he reached sun-seeking pond in Wu State, Taoist Master Guangxu's injuries flared up, forcing him to stop and look for a place to enter seclusion. But that immortal sword suddenly leapt from his arms, circled once around his neck and severed his head. Caught off guard, Taoist Master Guangxu was wrapped in sword qi and dared not move a muscle. He stood alone above the pond and soon perished. The immortal sword then escaped into the great void, never to be seen again. Since it was described as an immortal sword, Li Quantao did not question why a Purple Mansion realm cultivator would die from decapitation, and instead said, "Thank you for informing me, Senior." Cheng Gao simply nodded and replied, "I'm heading to Ganzi Prefecture in the Great Western Plains to meet someone, so I can't talk further now. But when you have time, do come visit me at the Sword Gate." Li Quantao nodded of course. After a few sips of tea, the sword cultivator pointed beneath them and said softly, "We've arrived at Moongaze Lake." A cultivator from the Li family had already come aboard to check and was overjoyed to see the group. Cheng Gao nodded at the sight and quietly escorted the three out, saying, "I'll be cultivating in Ganzi Prefecture of the Great Western Plains for the next few years. If any of you come west, feel free to visit." He piloted the sword ship back into the sky, returned to his seat, refilled his tea, and fell into silent contemplation. What a coincidence. Li Quantao is actually traveling with the Li family of Qingdu. The sword cultivator took a sip of tea, deep in thought. It makes sense. The Li of Qingdu are Wei's Li, and so are the Li from Hongsu. Helping each other is only natural. Chapter 824, Searching II, Changshui Tomb. Demonic clouds rolled across the sky, and muffled thunder rumbled as darkness enveloped the land. Only scattered glimmers of light shimmered in the air. Rain pattered endlessly as Li Xuanfeng rode the wind and halted above the black waters. Demonic mists churned on the surface. The strange signs of Murong'en's death had already faded, but the black smoke was growing thicker, forming a sky-darkening shroud. This was the outer edge of Changshui Tomb, where things looked noticeably calmer, but the water had still turned gray. Li Xuanfeng gazed into the distance, while a plain-looking middle-aged man with two gourds tied to his waist stood next to him, his vine armor glowing faintly with Dharma light. This man was none other than Lingu Rao, also known as Reazi Scorpion, a veteran cultivator from the Azure Pond sect who had long guarded the southern sea. His voice was hoarse and heavy as he said, "Fellow Taoist Xuanfeng, are you still able to proceed?" Lingu Rao had actually become renowned even earlier, and by seniority was more suited to the same generation as Li Tongya, but he had spent most of his life secluded in the southern sea and rarely socialized with people. In these borderlands, such distinctions didn't matter much, so they simply addressed one another as fellow Taoists. Lingu Rao didn't know what medicine Yuan Ziu had given Li Xuanfeng, but since only 3 months had passed, he feared Li Xuanfeng might still be injured. Thus he asked out of concern, and Li Xuanfeng nodded and replied, "Rest assured, fellow Taoist." Li Xuanfeng had witnessed the various Taoist masters slay Murong'en 3 months ago. Relics had rained down from the great void amid torrential rain and lightning, but he hadn't had the chance to linger as Yuan Ziu quickly took him back to Mount Baiyan. Yuan Ziu's stern face hadn't changed as he took out a strange wooden bottle from his robe and instructed, "Your injuries this time aren't serious, but both your divine spirit and body were still wounded by Maha's techniques. This bottle holds a drop of golden drip sacred dew. Take it. You'll recover fully within 3 months, and I'll have more tasks for you afterward." Naturally, Li Xuanfeng had accepted the medicine and consumed it in his cave dwelling. As expected of a Purple Mansion realm item, his injuries had been completely healed in 3 months, but when he inquired further, the losses proved to be heavy. Zhuang Cheng from Golden Feather sect was severely injured, and Lin Shao lost a portion of his lifespan. Lingu Laniying's hooked serpent died, and she herself is missing. There's no news of the others either. Not only had forces from all sides suffered casualties, but the Azure Pond sect's defensive line had also contracted significantly. It had originally been centered around Mount Baiyan, with Mount Yan Pass on one side and Baixiang Valley and Lake Xian on the other. They had once occupied the majority of Su State. Now, both fronts had suffered heavy losses. The eastern Baiguang Valley had fared slightly better as they retreated to the edge of Mount Yu, while the western Mount Yan Pass had fallen all the way back to the riverbanks. They only held Mount Baiyan in the central region of Su State. The few defensive lines that remained barely covered a quarter of Su State. Worse still, a new force had joined in from the north, the Gao family of Jingbo. This undoubtedly added more pressure to the Purple Mansion realm forces in the Great Void. Fortunately, the Gao family faced the Golden Feather sect, meaning the Azure Pond sect wouldn't have to face this demonic force directly. Li Xuanfeng's mission to scout Changshui Tomb was partly due to sect orders, but also a personal search for signs of his kin. If his guess was right, Lingu Rao likely had similar intentions. The two drifted through the demonic mists for some time. A few Qi cultivation realm cultivators flying over the tainted land below naturally couldn't detect them. After circling the outskirts twice, Lingu Rao quietly used mana to transmit a message into Li Xunfeng's ear. Fellow Taoist Xunfeng, I have a question I've been meaning to ask, though I don't know if I should. Li Xunfeng cast him a light glance while his spiritual sense continued scanning the ground below. He replied via mana transmission, "Speak freely, fellow Taoist." Lingu Rao's voice was slightly hoarse as he said quietly, "I heard you recently received a reward, a rare pill called the Zheng Metal Triple Qi Pill. I wonder, what are its properties?" Li Xunfeng had expected this question, but it wasn't something he could answer, so he apologized, saying, "This pill was given to me by a Taoist master. I'm afraid I cannot speak of it casually without his permission." Though Lingu Rao's eyes were narrow, they carried a calm and calculating. He looked deeply at Li Xunfeng and said quietly, "The High Sect intends to send me to reclaim Beixiang Valley and Lake Xian in an attempt to prevent the northern devil cultivators from linking up with those in Jiangnan and the Eastern Sea. If they join forces and strengthen each other, they may launch a combined assault." Li Xunfeng responded calmly, "You are powerful, fellow Taoist, and will surely not fail expectations. Sadly, I am lacking in strength. I was injured during the assault on Changshui Tomb, and the sect has ordered me to rest. I won't be able to accompany you." Lingu Rao's attention remained fixed on him, as if Li Xunfeng's words had confirmed certain suspicions. He looked away and replied, "You're being modest, Xunfeng. You're no longer just an ordinary Foundation Establishment realm cultivator. You're far beyond what I could compare to. Once the sect's rewards are distributed, you too will advance greatly in strength." Li Xunfeng responded with a polite remark, and Lingu Rao let out a long, quiet breath. The doubts that had troubled him for some time were finally confirmed. Keeping his expression unchanged, he continued speaking through mana transmission. "Thank you, fellow Taoist." Li Xunfeng had already deduced much and only awaited confirmation. The reward that Lingu Rao would receive next could very well verify his suspicions. He replied politely, "When that time comes, fellow Taoist, I hope we can spar more often." Of course, the two flew for a while, conversing via mana transmission. Soon, the rolling demonic clouds began to recede, and the black waters ahead gradually turned blue. Even the demonic energy in the air was thinning. Lingu Rao pulled out a thin piece of gauze and gently tossed it into the air. It instantly shrouded the two of them, concealing them in a veil of light so thoroughly that even an ordinary Foundation Establishment realm cultivator wouldn't be able to detect them. They followed the blue water for some distance before sensing the presence of Foundation Establishment realm cultivators, and even the familiar aura of a Southern Dao lineage belonging to the Purple Mansion and Golden Core Dao lineages. A sizable number of devil cultivators in the north also practiced methods of the Purple Mansion Dao and Golden Core Dao. However, their methods were often more extreme, frequently relying on blood essence for faster, more convenient cultivation. To northern cultivators, the Purple Mansion and Golden Core Daos was often seen as merely a branch of devil cultivation itself, and was frequently referred to as the Purple Gold Devil Dao. Meanwhile, what was called the Diverse Mansion Unified Furnace Devil Dao in Jiangnan was known in the north as the Heaven-born Devil Dao. In the end, it all came down to differing perspectives. Thus, whenever southern and northern cultivators clashed, it was common for each side to call the other devil scum. Unless one practiced the ancient immortal Dao of qi ingestion and internal cultivation, almost everyone would be labeled a devil by someone, no matter where they went. Chapter 825, Sensing the Opportunity. Li Xunfeng and Lingu Rao paused above the shimmering blue waters, not venturing any farther. While Lingu Rao focused intently on the scene, Li Xunfeng began to ponder, since Yuan Xiu, Qiushui, and the others are already in the Great Void, and are likely even watching directly over Changshui Tomb. Why do we need to investigate? This blue water must be some anomaly caused by the Great Ning Palace. There must be another reason we were sent. As he was thinking, Lingu Rao glanced twice at the blue water below and sent a mana transmission. Fellow Taoist Xunfeng, the waters above Changshui Tomb have transformed into converging water. They're certainly unnatural. Li Xunfeng considered the matter for a moment as he examined the luminous blue water amid the dark mist, then asked, could it be related to the dragon species? Perhaps not the dragon species exactly, replied Lingu Rao. The Lingu family originated from Mount Yue and was one of the rare families not descended from northern migrants. As native southerners, they had their own inherited knowledge. Lingu Rao said quietly, you may not know, but the Gao family, now known for their true flame, originally rose from the shores of Yan State's converging sea and had a lineage tied to converging water. Even the Chuoba family once attempted to seize the converging water and water mansion lineages. My concern is that transforming the entirety of Changshui Tomb into a converging water marsh would take immense effort, even for Purple Mansion realm cultivators. Unless a special spiritual artifact is involved, why go to such lengths? With such doubts weighing on them, one pondering the motives of Purple Mansion realm cultivators, while the other speculated about northern cultivators, the two refused to proceed farther. Li Xuanfeng activated his perception technique, golden light glinting in his eyes as he scanned the clouds, and asked, "Do you know what Dao lineage the royal descendants of Ning state cultivate?" Lingu Rao thought for a moment and replied, "They cultivate the true essence. They even have a realm called Anhui Heaven hidden within the Great Void. At their peak, they had several Purple Mansion realm cultivators. Whether they ever produced a true monarch, that we cannot say for sure." Li Xuanfeng considered this, then raised his head in unison with Lingu Rao to look eastward. As expected, a golden immortal radiance pierced through the demonic fog, shimmering hues of true essence and Dharma artifact light reflected across the blue waters. Lingu Rao slowly lifted his gaze, eyes contemplative, and murmured, "It's the Golden Feather sect." Li Xuanfeng's heart settled, and he activated his Dharma artifact at the same time as Lingu Rao. Sure enough, he heard Lingu Rao say, "When a Taoist master is in the Great Void, what could possibly escape their sight? If they ordered us to investigate, this is no simple task, so this is where it all leads." Both men now clearly understood the situation. Li Xuanfeng paused in thought, then spoke quietly. "Why would Taoist Master Yuan Ziu conceal his intentions behind a scouting mission? It is likely the Golden Feather sect doesn't want their own people to know. We must tread carefully." His words hinted at the underlying discord among the sects. Lingu Rao nodded in agreement, his face revealing approval. The two rose into the wind together, following the Golden Feather sect's cultivators from a distance. They had only flown a few kilometers when demonic light flickered in the air. A group of devil cultivators had broken into fierce combat with each other. Blood red and white lights clashed, black mist surged, and droplets of blood rain fell sporadically from the sky. Li Xuanfeng's earlier confusion began to ease as Lingu Rao commented, "No wonder we saw no patrolling devil cultivators on our way, so there was internal discord." Li Xuanfeng activated his perception technique again and peered into the demonic clouds. Sure enough, the sky was filled with devil cultivators locked in chaotic battle. Rays of light, demonic mist, blood essence, and pale smoke intermingled. The chaos was tearing through the sky with shattering bursts of Dharma light. High above, several figures were locked in fierce battle. A black-robed youth wielded a long spear, dark energy swirling around it. He had bright eyes, refined features, and a striking presence. His spear was pointed straight at a devil cultivator before him. His opponent had an ugly expression on his face. Surrounded by violet light and clad in vibrant, yet ornate robes, he was likely a direct descendant of the Murong family. The two appeared to have just clashed and now faced each other warily. Li Xuanfeng glanced at the spear-wielding youth and was struck by a sense of familiarity. He narrowed his eyes slightly and exclaimed, "Zhang Qian." This was none other than Zhang Qian, the youth who had once led Li Xuanfeng into the Grotto Heaven. After entering, he had vanished without a trace. Li Xuanfeng had long assumed he'd met a bad end, having heard nothing of him for years, never thought he'd fall to the devil Dao. Suspicion stirred in his heart, but then he saw the Murong devil cultivator, wrapped in purple light, stare deeply at Zhang Qian and murmur, "Fellow Taoist, what game are you playing? You suddenly led troops out of formation, so surely you've gained the blessing of the Golden Feather sect and the Azure Pond sect. But as a devil cultivator, what good end awaits you in the south? It was Murong En who failed to recognize your talent and could not tolerate a heroic youth like you. If you back down now, I'll personally recommend you to the Purple Mansion Realm cultivators." Zhang Qian did not respond. He stood firm with his spear and thrust forward, sending black clouds rolling and striking the violet radiance. It was only when the violent clash scattered dark smoke through the air that he spoke, "Murong Gong. This is my first time clashing with the Purple Essence Dao. Let's see some real skill." Li Xuanfeng watched as the two fought fiercely. Below them, devil cultivators were clashing among themselves, while Buddhist cultivators released golden light in retaliation. It was impossible to tell who was fighting whom. Rather, it seemed like everyone had seized the moment to settle personal grudges. After only a glance or two, he grasped the situation. The northern forces were extremely fragmented. There were Buddhist cultivators of the 7 Dharma forms, numerous devil Daos, and even Purple Mansion Realm and Golden Core Realm cultivators. Many of them were simply devil cultivators conscripted from surrounding regions. They were all greedy and self-serving, harboring grudges against each other while coveting one another's possessions. Zhang Qian had secretly assembled a force and marched south, only to be intercepted. Yet the devil cultivators on both sides had already descended into chaos. They were settling old debts, seizing opportunities, and battling in a disorderly frenzy. Lingu Rao watched for a while as he slowly grasped the situation and said quietly, "Fellow Taoist Xuanfeng, looks like the devil cultivators are having a mutiny among themselves." Li Xuanfeng responded calmly, "If they were not backed by Purple Mansion Realm cultivators, how could a mutiny like this even occur?" Lingu Rao replied, "Exactly, but could the Golden Feather sect really be backing these devil cultivators? That would be strange indeed." Lingu Rao's confusion was understandable. These devil cultivators consumed human blood and human pills. Their conduct and cultivation techniques were thoroughly demonic. Worse still, they had slain countless cultivators from Jiangnan. The various sects had long come to despise them. This was true even under the Azure Pond sect's governance, so how could the prestigious families under the Golden Feather sect, many of whom had suffered great losses in this war, accept devil cultivators under their banner? Where would these devil cultivators even be allowed to settle? All sects, regardless of their foundations, had to maintain at least a semblance of morality in Jiangnan. The Azure Pond sect was already being denounced as a demonic sect by others. Even when they harvested blood essence, they had to disguise it as intersect warfare. They dared not openly kill and bleed innocents. The Golden Feather sect's reputation was far better than Azure Pond sect's. They now had the eyes of the world upon them, so how could they possibly take in a band of rebellious devil cultivators? No matter how you framed it, it simply wouldn't make sense. Moreover, from the perspective of the devil cultivators, allying with Golden Feather sect was a bad deal. It didn't matter if the Golden Feather sect shielded them now. Once the North-South conflict ended, the reckoning would come. Could it be that they aren't with the Golden Feather sect? But then why are there so many Golden Feather sect cultivators here? Clang. After watching for a few moments, Li Xuanfeng and Lingu Rao saw that the Golden Feather sect could no longer remain idle. Their cloudship tore through the sky, its concealing mist completely dispersed, and numerous cultivators leapt from both sides in rapid succession. Golden Feather sect. These cultivators didn't assist Zhang Kaiyan in the air but instead dove into the demonic mist. They launched coordinated assaults to hunt down devil cultivators. Taking advantage of Murong Gong being tied down, they deliberately avoided Zhang Kaiyan's men and targeted the enemy devil cultivators. Chapter 826, Sensing the Opportunity, II. The battlefield had grown even more chaotic. Screams and angry shouts rose and fell in waves. Li Xuanfeng and Lingu Rao watched when suddenly a sharp screech pierced the sky. A new demonic cloud was surging toward the battlefield from the north. Lord Gao and Master Monk Lujin's forces have arrived. A loud shout rang out over the battlefield, followed by a blast of scorching heat. Zhang Kaiyan's expression shifted, and he retreated with a sweep of his spear, shattering the incoming fire. The tip of his spear now glowed faintly red. A man appeared in the sky, wearing a dark red and black robe, a golden jade belt, and dark crimson boots. His eyes were deep-set and sharp as he leaned on a cavalry lance amid the clouds and sneered, "So this is all the Murong family is capable of. Seems a century of clinging to Buddhist doctrine has ground your noble lineage into spinelessness." Murong Gong's face darkened and his voice turned cold and low. "Lu Fangjing, why don't you try me yourself? All you do is bark." The man in the dark red robe scowled, his tone turning icy. "Murong Gong. My Gao family bears a northern surname personally granted by Wei Emperor Gong. It's one thing for Taoist masters to speak as equals, but you've no right to speak the Lu surname. Know your place." Murong Gong spat disdainfully. "Ha, what a noble Gao name. It was Lu Qingyang and Chuoba Changaming who sold out our 16 Eastern Hu families to beg riches from the Wei Emperor, and you still dare show your face. The Yuan family at least reclaimed the Chuoba name, but your family still flaunts its fake lineage, shameless beyond comparison." Gao Fangjing stared coldly, leaving his lance at rest as he replied softly, "My Gao ancestors were of Zhou descent. Do not compare us with your kind." As the two exchanged barbs, a monk stepped down from the sky and stopped beside Murong Gong. His face was covered with dense golden patterns and his eyes were tightly shut. He quietly turned toward the mist. Li Xuanfeng watched silently. Beside him, Lingu Rao seemed uneasy and asked in a low voice, "Xuanfeng, should we intervene?" "Wait a bit longer," said Li Xuanfeng, holding back his longbow. Sure enough, a man in Golden Feather sect robes rose from below. He flew to Zhang Kaiyan's side with a grave expression, drew a thin golden sword from his robe, and held it upright in silence. As the cultivators stared intently at each other, the monk whose face was covered in golden markings slowly opened his eyes. His pupils were a sea of white with a single grain-sized speck of gold that pierced through the mist. He spoke softly, "You two benefactors, please reveal yourselves." Li Xuanfeng and Lingu Rao were silent for a moment before they withdrew their near-invisible veil of gauze, allowing their figures to appear midair. Zhang Kaiyan initially looked up at them cautiously, but upon seeing Li Xuanfeng's attire and face, his heart skipped a beat. A flicker of guilt crossed his expression as he sighed inwardly. It's Senior Xuanfeng. He had once received help from Li Xuanfeng and remembered the senior vividly. Though he now suspected it might have been orchestrated by the Purple Mansion Realm cultivators, the impact was real. Li Xuanfeng had truly saved him during a time of crisis. Seeing him again as a devil cultivator filled Zhang Kaiyan with a touch of shame. "Thankfully, we didn't meet in the midst of battle. A small mercy within misfortune." The Golden Feather sect Taoist clearly hadn't expected their appearance and offered a slight, surprised bow toward the two. The devil cultivator camp reacted more dramatically. The gold-marked Buddhist cultivator examined them quietly, while Murong Gong's face twisted with a mix of fear and hatred. His lips moved and he sneered coldly. "A Shilu dog, your way-blooded kin has arrived." Gao Fangjing appeared not to hear his words. He carefully studied Li Xuanfeng in silence, though the grip on his spear noticeably tightened. The appearance of the two caused a tense stalemate in the sky, until Murong Gong finally muttered darkly, "What are you two waiting for?" Boom! A burst of mana light exploded in the sky. The gold-marked monk clasped his hands together, catching Lingu Rao's curved blade. Gao Fangjing twirled his lance, encircling the two, and a surge of golden-red true flame erupted, forcing them to raise their Dharma artifacts in defense. Murong Gong raised his head, locking eyes with Li Xuanfeng. Radiant lines began to glow along the lower half of his face. He slowly lifted his longbow, a speck of golden light resting on the string. Damn it. He stepped closer on violet energy, already regretting his earlier words. Had he known Li Xuanfeng and the others would appear, he'd never have provoked Gao Fangjing. He had simply thought everything under control and let disdain slip through. Though he looked down on the Shilu family and scorned their character, Gao Fangjing's strength was undeniably superior and the best suited to face Li Xuanfeng. Fine then. The Shilu family are petty men. Provoked or not, they'd never step in anyway. This thought flashed through his mind in an instant. A buzzing rang in his ears and pain stabbed his chest. He instantly formed a seal and summoned a mass of violet clouds, plunging into them to evade the arrow's light. It was indeed the best move. Li Xuanfeng's name had grown well known, and enemies no longer dared to face his magical arrows head-on. They would always dodge first. If one didn't have astral chi to trace a target, this violet mist technique was quite effective, and even Li Xuanfeng couldn't locate him at once. Yet Li Xuanfeng's expression didn't shift. Ignoring Murong Gong's hasty retreat, Li Xuanfeng lightly raised his longbow and released the golden string. Nearby, the gold-marked monk suddenly jerked his head up and started coughing out blood. The monk gently swept a hand across his chest, and the gaping wound slowly closed. He caught Lingu Rao's spell art with one hand and called out in a resonant voice, "Taoist Murong." Before he could finish, he saw Li Xuanfeng's golden bow aimed at the violet mist. The man's gaze was calm and unwavering. Murong Gong found himself caught between advancing and retreating, and shifted the violet cloud to lunge toward Lingu Rao instead. "Master Monk Lujin, since you're not afraid of bodily harm, go deal with that one," said Murong Gong. Master Monk Lujin showed no anger. The golden markings on his face shimmered faintly, and a gentle look rose in his eyes. He brought his hands together before his chest in a respectful gesture, and said softly, "I am Lujin, of White Horse Temple under the great Mahayana Dharma realm. Greetings, benefactor." Li Xuanfeng scrutinized him. This man's mana emanated an uncommon clarity. It was utterly different from the many Buddhist cultivators he had seen before. In fact, he bore a faint resemblance to the guest cultivator King Heng from his own household. But the battlefield left no room for an extended exchange. Li Xuanfeng raised his bow, brilliant golden light condensing on the string as usual. Lujin stared intently at the arrow's glow, his voice calm and low. "The arrow is a weapon that harms. It cannot appear in the Buddha's land." Chapter 827, Chang Yun. As his lips parted, a streak of golden light emerged and rippled outward like waves. Lujin retreated a step, coughing up 2 droplets of blood, and a small hole appeared on his chest. Li Xuanfeng frowned slightly. His last arrow's strength had clearly weakened. As he drew his bow again, he saw Lujin retrieve a scroll from his sleeve. He held it with both hands and gently shook it open. Countless shimmering golden runes burst from the scripture, scattering through the air like rain and filling the sky before him. But Li Xuanfeng had already struck him twice and paid it no mind as he loosed the golden light from his bowstring. Buzz! Lujin's Dharma body trembled, and he coughed up more blood. Realizing his technique was ineffective, he hesitated for only 2 breaths before opening his lips to chant a spell. Li Xuanfeng felt a murmured chant stream into his ears, causing his mind to twist in pain. The profound pearl talisman seed floating above his chi seed did not stir and release a cool current as it once had. It remained still and was trembling faintly in the air. Just as I thought. Li Xuanfeng had already sensed something was off back in the pristine heavens pool below of the Xinyu pristine marsh seal. When Mahapaijia attacked, he had never felt the cooling sensation of the talisman seed. Instead, he had been fully exposed to the multicolored light. He had only vaguely realized it then, but now the truth was clear in his heart. I consumed the human pill. Although the talisman seed didn't immediately vanish due to certain reasons, it has already detached from my chi. All my current cultivation stems from borrowing its power. To seek its protection again would be difficult. His head throbbed with pain and his eyes narrowed, but his grip on the bow remained steady. A flash of golden light burst outward, aimed once again at Lujin. Master Monk Lujin observed him closely, but couldn't tell if his spell had taken effect. However, the more intense Li Xuanfeng's headache grew, the less he delayed. He knocked 5 arrows on the string in an instant, and their buzzing echoed swiftly through the mist. A strong sense of danger welled up in Lujin's heart. He formed a hand seal, and the scattered golden light condensed into a cassia of glittering light that draped over his body. As their duel reached a critical moment, the other battle was also heating up. Gao Fangjing nearby was engulfed in golden-red true flame. His cavalry lance swept forth, creating arcs of red light that forced his two opponents into retreat. Golden-red brilliance blazed from his eyes, and the searing true flame boiled mist from beneath his feet. Zhang Kai's spear had turned red-hot from the heat. The golden feather sect cultivator beside him was wreathed in black smoke, and the golden sword in his hand was already warping. He urgently transmitted using a secret technique. "Senior Masters, please help us." This man is truly difficult to handle. True Flame was among the top-tier spiritual flames for refining artifacts, and known for melting Dharma artifacts with ease. Gao Fangjing was used to rendering enemy gear useless halfway into a fight. He chuckled darkly. "You cultivate Zheng metal, yet foolishly draw in both metal and water chi to have it both ways. Running into my blazing True Flame, that's just your bad luck." Boom! Just as he finished speaking, an explosive crack burst out beside him. Lujin's cassia had been shattered, sending golden streams of light flying everywhere. His entire Dharma body was covered in cracks as it flickered with multicolored lights. One hand clutched the massive hollow in his chest, while the other was pressed against his lips. His eyes gleamed startlingly bright, and his voice echoed through the air like a grand bell. Li Xuanfeng's fist was clenched pale, the markings on his face flickering in and out of visibility. Lujin's incantation didn't just cause pain, it seemed to carry the power of awakening and repentance. It was clearly targeted specifically at Li Xuanfeng. As the chanting grew faster, the heavenly gilded helm within his chi-si suddenly stirred, showing signs of unrest. However, he stared coldly at Lujin, slowly raised his longbow, and a golden-red arrow rose into the air to gracefully settle onto the string. Buzz, buzz. The golden-red radiance shone so brilliantly that even the fiercely battling Gao Fangjing turned to glance to the side. The golden brilliance swept across Li Xuanfeng's face and shoulders, flowing behind him as his eyes stayed locked on Lujin, whose complexion grew increasingly pale. Clang. Light flashed past and the grand bell-like resonance finally faded, replaced by rapid and forceful chanting. A golden cassia appeared on Lujin's body once again, but it was already too late. A heavy glow flickered and the golden-red brilliance was suspended in midair, revealing the true form of the arrow. It was densely inscribed with glowing runes. The arrow had been caught between two fingers. An old monk had appeared in front of Lujin, his long eyebrows tinged with white as he carefully examined the arrow in his hand. Li Xuanfeng waited for 2 seconds. As expected, Yuan Ziu's stern and disapproving voice came from beside him. "Taoist friend, you've broken the rules." This figure was likely the merciful one of the great Mahayana Dharma realm. Unlike the usual three-headed, six-armed depictions, he looked like an ordinary monk. He pulled Lujin back a step and said in a hoarse voice, "Indeed." Their figures quickly faded. Li Xuanfeng raised an eyebrow slightly and saw Taoist Master Qiushui now standing before the cultivators of the Golden Feather sect. After waiting a moment, a rich golden aura surged into the sky, coalescing beside Zhang Kai. "Thank you, fellow Taoists." The Taoist master beside Zhang Kai stood shrouded in a golden mist and nodded slightly. Zhang Kai appeared to know him already and stood respectfully by his side. The devil cultivator entourage also quickly gathered at his feet. "No need for courtesy, Taoist Master Cheng Yun," Yuan Ziu replied. Master Cheng Yun's voice was crisp and efficient as he smiled. "I've spent many years in the Eastern Sea, always hoping to found a sect on the mainland. But until now I hadn't found a place to settle. Sioux State is truly a fine land." Taoist Master Qiushui nodded with a smile. "It was your well-laid preparations that turned the tide for us. From today onward, our Golden Feather sect and your order share the bond of founding sects together. The North-South contention is nearing its end. May you steward Sioux State's treasured lands well. Your sect may rival any other. So that's how it is." Li Xuanfeng exchanged a glance with Lingu Rao, both seeing realization in the other's eyes. These devil cultivators weren't truly joining the Golden Feather sect. They were backed by an overseas Taoist master. These devil cultivators would soon establish sects under this Taoist master's command in Sioux State, allowing the Cyan Plume sect and the Azure Pond sect to remain clean of association. Even Li Xuanfeng and Lingu Rao were merely investigating the area and had only acted accordingly. After all, founding sects as devil cultivators, we can't afford to appear too close. Lingu Rao chuckled coldly in his heart, but give it 100 years and they'll be washed clean, just another orthodox sect in Sioux State. Ha 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 ha. Taoist Master Cheng Yun laughed heartily, his gaze pausing on Li Xuanfeng. Just as he was about to speak, he jerked to the side. The other Taoist masters turned in unison toward the center of Chengshui Tomb. A shimmering light was descending from the sky, radiating an alluring glow. Li Xuanfeng stared at it for a moment and thought, it must be the great Ning Palace. Judging from the Taoist master's tones, the ultimate goal of both the northern and southern Tao lineages is this great Ning Palace. Chapter 828, Ready and Set to Depart. Taoist Master Cheng Yun paused briefly and then spoke. It's the great Mahayana Dharma realm again. They still shrink from battle, even at such a critical juncture. Any thoughts, fellow Taoists? The three Taoist masters were far from ordinary. However, the great Mahayana Dharma realm was renowned among Buddhist cultivators for their survival skills. While Li Xuanfeng's arrow was powerful, the monk's rescue of Lu Jin had been rough and imprecise. It was more like taking the opportunity to withdraw than an act of necessity. Taoist Master Qiushui said slowly, "There's nothing surprising about it. The great Mahayana Dharma realm has always been like this, half ancient, half modern, and ever-wavering. If not for that, they wouldn't have fallen from being the premier Buddhist sect to where they are now." Taoist Master Yuanziu disliked Buddhist cultivators the most, but even his sarcasm carried his usual solemnness. The monks see profit in the south and drool with desire. But when they witness slaughter by the thousands and blood flooding the land, their scriptures suddenly come to mind. They cry sin, sin, and tuck their tails to retreat. Isn't it always the same? Binding today's cultivators with ancient rules only ends in a mess, just like that white horse temple of theirs. His words were sharp, and the other two Taoist masters didn't know how to respond. Taoist Master Qiushui chuckled inwardly. No wonder those two seniors always argue. Tixao's words are sharp by nature, and though Si Boxiu disdains mockery, he's no slouch when it comes to sarcasm either. Taoist Master Cheng Yun awkwardly looked away, and his interest was caught by the deep blue converging water beneath his feet. He seemed lost in thought, hesitated a moment, then suddenly spoke. "I've only just emerged from seclusion and tore through the great void to rush here. However, this vast expanse of converging water at Changshui Tomb struck me as odd. Who conjured it? Or is it the work of some special spirit artifact?" Yuanziu didn't hold him in high regard and sneered inwardly. He's from the Eastern Sea, that's why he's always cautious about everything. He's naturally wary of any interference from the Dragon Clan, yet his aged face only shifted slightly as he replied, "No." Taoist friend Can used the Xinyu pristine marsh seal, combined with the artifact's natural effect, to transform this place into a marsh. The Murong family, leveraging the principle of water virtue, converted that marsh into converging water, thus creating this great lake. I see. I had thought the North had employed some kind of spirit artifact. Taoist Master Cheng Yun's concerns were somewhat eased, and he nodded. It seems it won't be long before Senior Zaipai condenses her core if she can wield such divine ability. He paused, and then smiled. I'm fortunate indeed to have migrated inland and been given the chance to witness such a grand occasion. Missing Shang Yuan's ascension to true monarch was truly the greatest regret of my life. Taoist Master Qiushui's voice remained as gentle and graceful as ever as he said, "When the true monarch attained the Tao, the snowy peaks of the northern sea stretched for 1,000 kilometers and were mostly transformed into the green jade heavenly mountains. His disciple, Nianyi, has already established a sect there called the True Unity Tao, with its mountain gate named Green Jade Cliff. If you're interested, you should go take a look." Perhaps because their sects shared similar stances, Taoist Master Qiushui's tone was much gentler compared to Yuanziu's, prompting Cheng Yun to nod slightly. The Taoist gathered his sleeves and reminded the others. While pristine water can be transformed into converging water, it can also be reversed. We must guard against saboteurs. The great void must be tightly defended. If this converging water disperses and we fail to catch the great Ning Palace, then all of this will have been for nothing. Of course. Yuanziu replied stiffly, "There are too many eyes watching within the great void. Who would dare commit such a grave offense and risk the wrath of both northern and southern Tao lineages? Not even the great Wang or Zai families could bear that burden, let alone our sects." Li Xuanfeng stood silently to the side, matched by Lingu Rao on the opposite side. They were like two statues, yet neither missed a single word spoken by the Taoist masters. Li Xuanfeng suddenly realized, it seems neither Ning Heiyuan joining my expedition nor the immense impact of the Xinyu pristine marsh seal was a coincidence. It had all been arranged long ago. Taoist Master Zaipai, the most powerful in the south, personally acted to turn Changshui Tomb into a marsh, then the north stepped in to convert it into converging water. Every step was deliberate. Though the north and south are at odds, their coordination is flawless. They contend in the small and cooperate in the great. The world is like a bird caught in a cage. Much like a fish in a net, there is not a sliver of a chance of escape. His gaze fell, yet he heard Taoist Master Cheng Yun's voice again. "Since the great Ning Palace has descended, let us each send our envoys." Behind him, Zhang Qian slightly raised his brows, gripping his long spear tightly as he gazed toward the distant crystalline glow. Li Qinghang descended from the sky on lightning. Mount Qingdu was already packed with people. Li Ziming led a welcoming party, visibly moved as he cupped his hands and said with a smile, "With aunt and elder brother safely returned, my heart is finally at ease. Your cultivation has improved again. replied Li Qingheng, smiling at him. Although only Zicheng among the Ziyu generation had been raised personally by her, she was still easier to approach than most, and Ziming and the others were all quite familiar with her. Li Ziming stepped aside, and Li Xuanxuan, standing behind him with a smile, said, "I knew all along that those devil cultivators wouldn't stand a chance with Qingheng commanding thunder and lightning." The entire Li family was overjoyed by the two's safe return, and the heavy atmosphere atop the mountain was instantly swept away. Li Zijai looked around and asked, "But where is our Mingwang?" This. Li Xuanxuan paused and let out a deep sigh before answering. "It's truly unfortunate. He entered seclusion just a few days ago to break through, but there's a difficult matter involved. It's a long story, and we'll need to ask Zijai about it." Li Zijai understood that there was something inconvenient to say, but he didn't want to neglect Li Quantao. He turned slightly and said gently, "Quantao is seriously injured. Let him recuperate on my mountain for now. There are many family matters to attend to. I must go inspect them first." Li Quantao had been absorbed in examining the great formation on the mountain, but when he heard Li Zijai, the soreness and exhaustion rushed in all at once. He nodded and replied, "I know a bit about formations. This mountain's setup is quite clever. Go ahead, Brother Zijai, I'll take this chance to heal." And Siwei escorted him down, and the others rode the wind upward. Li Qingheng relayed all that had happened and shared the good news from Cheng Gao that Li Xuanfeng was unharmed, putting everyone at ease. Li Ziming led the group onto Lijing Mountain. He activated the formation, circled around to the rear mountain, and unsealed several layers of wards, revealing a residence made of green stone. The residence had 2 wings to the left and right, with a circular white stone pond in the center. Li Qingheng let out a soft sigh and said, "It's been many years since I last returned to this old house." Chapter 829, Ready and Set to Depart, II. This was the very house built by the Li family's founder and his 4 sons when they had first established their family. Back then, Li Yuanxiu had managed family affairs from here, and Qingheng had lived here briefly. Their memories were still fresh. The house had since been reinforced with formations, and the ground now glimmered faintly with light. Li Ziming and the others seldom visited this place. As they strode into the back courtyard, Li Qingheng caught sight of a stone cage placed precisely at the courtyard's center. The cage had no extra engravings, and only a faint glow indicated it was lined with formation arrays. At its very center, a child crouched, hugging his knees and lying sideways on the ground. The child's golden eyes swept over them when he saw them approach. His cheeks were covered in tiny feather-like scales, and he stared at them blankly. Li Xuanxuan said, "This is Jiang Ao." He briefly explained the child's birth and Qingheng's suspicions, then sighed gloomily. "He's only a few months old, but refuses breast milk and cooked food. He only craves raw flesh. He doesn't understand scolding or words. Whenever he sees a person, he pounces on them to try and devour them like a beast." Li Zijai sighed inwardly, examined the child closely, and flicked out a ray of heavenly glow to capture him. The child immediately revealed a look of greed, biting at the glow with rows of white teeth. He didn't stop trying to chew even as his mouth filled with blood from the recoil. After a few more moments of observation, Li Zijai let out a deep breath and said softly, "This is Mingwang's child." Li Xuanxuan looked up at him, but it was Li Ziming who spoke first. "Brother, I heard that there's a veiled Yin Dao lineage in Chen State's Zhejiang, known as the Kingdom of Women. Perhaps seeking a bride from there might help. It's not that simple. I've been researching everywhere ever since I learned of this." Li Zijai spoke softly. The Wei Emperor sought to gather all Dao lineages under his rule, and the veiled Yin lineage suffered greatly. Its practitioners were forced into the imperial harem or turned into eunuch cultivators. Thus it has practically vanished since the Wei dynasty. The only place where it still exists is Chen State. But that place is a kingdom of women, where yin and yang are reversed, so how could they possibly send one of their own out to marry? They might only allow someone like Zhao Wei to marry into their state. Li Ziming was taken aback, but after a moment of thought, it was understandable. Li Zijai gently set down Li Jiangao and spoke again. "What I mean is, there's no need to completely dismiss the matter. Anything involving a fate tied to metallic essence often carries strange outcomes. Have a few more children and see how things develop." As for Jiangao, he seemed troubled as well and could only say, "Let's raise him for now. Perhaps there will one day be a method to cure his disorder. After all, he is our blood. We can't just end things hastily." Everyone nodded and took a seat in the main hall of the old residence. Li Qingheng, never one for ostentation, had already transformed her long feathered robe into a plain white garment. She spoke softly. "Though we faced a demonic calamity, we gained quite a bit in return." She retrieved several storage pouches from her robes and laid them out on the table, along with 2 Dharma artifacts. One was a dimly glowing small jar, while the other was a gray, misty short blade. There was also a fist-sized pile of black shards, the remnants of Chiman Diffu's Dharma artifact that Li Qingheng had conveniently gathered. The storage pouches from Qi Cultivation Realm cultivators weren't worth mentioning. The The truly valuable ones had belonged to Qiu Jai and the devil cultivator Ji. But having managed the household for many years, Li Xuanxuan considered even the smallest scrap valuable. He took out the Qi cultivation realm pouches, sorted the blood-nourishing items from the mundane, and as a former market steward with a sharp eye, quickly made an estimate. These Qi cultivation realm goods alone are worth 10 years of our family's profits. After all, those devil cultivators had plundered and looted plenty, so they had quite a few treasures in their pouches. Just as Li Zijia used his mana to lift the black shards on the table for a closer inspection, Li Xuanxuan spoke in his gravelly voice. This is black profound gold, a material of the foundation establishment realm. The old man had lived long and seen much. Li Zijia nodded and placed the shards back on the table. Li Ziming, who still didn't possess a foundation establishment realm Dharma artifact, was examining the two items. Li Qinghong said softly, "These were obtained by me and Zijia during a life-and-death battle in the north. Zijia still doesn't have a decent magic sword, so I intend to arrange them this way." She handed the intricately patterned demonic jar to Li Ziming and said quietly, "This artifact was refined by the devil for many years and contains many good things, but it suits his devil techniques. If I were to use it, not only would it be powerless, it might even be damaged." Li Ziming's palm lit up slightly, and black smoke rose from the demonic jar. He shook his head and said, "Aunt, your thunder technique is particularly effective against demons. My bright yang isn't weak either, but even I can't use this. Why don't we?" Li Qinghong interrupted softly, "You and I will be heading north in a few days. Guanzhong is filled with cultivators, especially those from the Azure Pond sect, but perhaps even other sects will send representatives. Take this item and exchange it for a Dharma artifact that suits you." Li Ziming had already guessed as much by the time his aunt finished and nodded. Li Qinghong then handed the gray, misty blade to Li Zijia and instructed, "You have broader connections within the sect. Perhaps you can trade this for a proper Dharma sword." Li Zijia nodded. Li Qinghong then took inventory of the remaining contents in the storage pouches and arranged for them all to be added to the family's reserves. She then asked, "How is the family's current collection of spell arts?" Li Xuanxuan knew these things like the back of his hand and responded immediately, 27 low-grade spell arts, 15 of grade 1, 7 of grade 2, and 3 of grade 3. If we include the profound water sword technique and the wing clipper spear technique, we only have 6 in total. As for grade 4, only the slaughter Jun Kui light remains. We have very few perception and footwork techniques, just the grand-veined golden eyes, clear-sight spirit pupil, and river-crossing torrential step. Li Qinghong nodded and said, "We cannot practice the devil techniques from northern cultivators, but their spell arts are usable. These pouches contain the grade 3 techniques such as the white current control method and black smoke cloud sigil. They're worth studying." After all, cultivators from both the north and south rarely carried their cultivation methods on them. It was nearly impossible to acquire spells from fallen enemies. Li Qinghong had only managed to acquire them this time because the devil cultivators had just ravaged Su State, destroying sects and throwing many spell techniques into their pouches. Li Xuanxuan received them like treasured artifacts. Li Qinghong's tone turned serious. "The defeat at Chengshui Tomb was not our fault, and returning will not bring much punishment. However, we cannot delay our return. The Sword Gate's flying boat sent us all the way to the lake. The Azure Pond sect likely noticed I came home. As for Zijia." Li Zijia shook his head slightly and explained, "My jade pendant is linked with the Azure Pond sect's General Affairs Hall. I absolutely must return north." Everyone turned to look at him, and Li Zijia said, "While on the flying boat earlier, I saw a crystalline light falling northward, landing directly on Chengshui Tomb. No matter how important Ning State's relics are, they can't compare with something that fell from a royal tomb. If I'm right, the north-south conflict is about to come to an end." A calm expression appeared on Li Zijia's face. He turned to his younger brother Li Ziming, the corner of his mouth curving into a gentle smile. His voice was warm and composed as he said, "Be patient, brother Ming. Once our family weathers this storm, I'll help you acquire the Radiant Sky Stone." Li Ziming had been pondering this matter for a long time and had been distracted throughout the entire conversation. His brother's words struck him straight in the heart, leaving him unsure of what to say. The words caught in his throat for a long while before he finally said, "Just take care of yourself, brother. My cultivation still has a long way to go." Chapter 830, In the Demonic Smoke. Li Xuanxuan glanced at Li Ziming and then at Li Zijia. He took in the expressions of both brothers and drew out 2 jade boxes from his sleeve. He said, "These are the broken copper cash sword and the 6-fold profound thunder punishment tokens. The copper cash was Yu Mujian's Dharma artifact. Its quality was decent, but unfortunately, the refinement techniques of Buddhist cultivators couldn't compare to those of the immortal or demonic Daos. The material was fine, but the ritual refinement was rather crude. The sword had been severed by the Qingch sword, but Li Xuanxuan brought it out and placed it in his palm. The yellow-gold cross-section was smooth, but whether the merciful one had left behind any contingencies was unclear. But the six-fold profound thunder punishment tokens were altogether different. Though far inferior to the six-fold quaking profound thunder tokens, their craftsmanship was still top tier. They were clearly not ordinary items. Li Qinghong opened the jade box to find 6 shimmering palm-sized silver-white command tokens. Their engraved scripts lit up, emitting a soft crackling thunder. Li Qinghong picked one up and weighed it in her hand. A stream of silver lightning surged into her palm, prompting her to exclaim in admiration, "What a marvelous treasure." She examined it attentively, gently stroking the engraved script. The remaining 5 tokens immediately lifted into the air, swirling around her wrist like streaks of light. Li Qinghong closed her eyes and softly said, "Such a pity, it's profound thunder." Li Qinghong's Dao foundation was the profound thunderpool, derived from the winter thunderclap. Though it bore the name Profound Thunder, it belonged to the category of celestial thunder and wasn't a perfect match. Still, it was a thunder-type Dharma artifact. The mismatch merely resulted in minor inefficiencies when channeling mana. After playing with it for a while, Li Qinghong flipped her hand and stowed it away, saying quietly, "This is a top-tier Dharma artifact, yet I've never used this type of celestial token artifact before. I'll need to study it thoroughly." After storing the token, she unfastened the profound pattern bottle at her waist. The Dharma artifact glowed with a rich violet hue and was covered in thunder patterns. The bottle radiated brilliance on the table as Li Qinghong softly said, "This Dharma artifact originally belonged to Brother Jiao. It came from within the Eastern Fire Grotto Heaven. Its effects vary depending on the wielder's immortal foundation. In Brother Jiao's hands, it had some unique effects. But in mine, it merely functions as a container, absorbing and storing spirit thunder." She lifted the bottle and tilted it with one hand, pouring out small bursts of radiant lightning. Each stream of thunder was guided into her palm, some wild, some agile, but each with its own unique character. Li Qinghong took several small golden bottles from her storage pouch and stored them one by one, 7 in total, before handing the treasured bottle to Li Zijai. "It was always meant to be yours." "Aunt, how can you say that?" Li Zijai examined it briefly. The profound patterned bottle was only 3 fingers wide in his palm, with delicate carvings and a shimmer of violet light. He lifted his hand and placed it into Li Ziming's grasp, saying, "Since it came from the Eastern Fire Grotto Heaven, it should be in your hands." Li Zijai quickly closed Li Ziming's fingers around the item in his moment of distraction. He turned anxiously to Li Qinghong, uneasily saying, "Aunt, Xinger is still in the north." Li Xuanxuan had been sitting at the edge of his seat for some time, wanting to speak. When he saw his grandson finally bring it up, the old man rose and said in a low voice, "Qinghong, about this matter." The only one in the Li family now capable of crossing the river and returning unscathed was Li Qinghong. She nodded gently and replied warmly, "I understand. I'll return to the north at once." "Thank you, Aunt," Li Zijai responded with deep gratitude. Li Ziming stood beside him, understanding full well, and opened his mouth to speak only to feel warmth in his palm. Li Zijai still had his hand over Li Ziming's, pressing the profound patterned bottle firmly into his palm. All words of protest stuck in Li Ziming's throat, and finally he only uttered, "Be careful, Aunt." Li Qinghong nodded and replied, "Time is of the essence. Ziming will come with me to the north. Zijai, recover with Li Quantao and follow us in a few days. I'll head back to Qingdu to prepare." Li Ziming stood up, and the aunt and nephew soared away on the wind together. Li Zijai escorted them to the courtyard gate, and then wandered restlessly around the ancestral house before returning to his seat. Li Xuanxuan was sorting various spirit items, his aged face drooping but otherwise unreadable. He lifted his gaze and, seeing the somber look on Li Zijai's face, said hoarsely, "Ziming spent years in seclusion and saw Yuexiang only a few times. How deep could his affection be? Don't take it to heart. He is a bit cold, but not heartless to such an extent." "Grandfather." Li Zijai sighed softly, his lips trembling. Only now did the pain show on his face. He replied, "I don't want to take risks either. I understand Ziming's mind, and I know Yuexiang's chances are slim. But what if there's still a sliver of hope?" His remaining words turned to ash in his mouth. He hadn't known Li Yuexiang had gone north. Only later did he learn it had been arranged by the family. He wasn't the only one who lacked feeling. Mount Yan Pass, demonic smoke rolled thick across the ground, with scattered motes of dim light rising through the gloom. Fragments of collapsed white stone lay all around the darkened ruins. The bloodstains had long since dried, leaving only a few shards of bone strewn across the wreckage. The ruins were utterly deserted, but a flicker of black light slithered out from a crack in the rocks, transforming into a black serpent that glided silently through the desolation. Li Wuxiao's black serpent eyes stayed on the demonic smoke as he slithered forward. It had been months since he had fled from Chengshui Tomb, and this was his first time reappearing at Mount Yan Pass. The war between North and South had plunged the skies into chaos. Li Wuxiao had seen Chengshui Tomb flood with pristine water and immortal radiance collapse. Thus he had reverted to his true form without hesitation, shrank down, and dove into the underground waters, fleeing southward without a glance back. As a native hooked serpent of the Eastern Sea, Li Wuxiao was no stranger to survival. Having lived so long in such perilous waters, escape was second nature to him. Once he was within his element, the water, he easily shook off pursuers and fled ever southward. But Li Wuxiao hadn't expected Mount Yan Pass to fall. Demonic smoke cloaked the land all along his path, and he'd been attacked 3 times in his blind flight. He had almost lost his life in those battles. The only reason I blend in with this demonic smoke is because I was born in the Eastern Sea, am covered head to tail in demonic chi, and never trained in any orthodox sect's true path or technique. If I were like those other sect mount beasts glowing with righteous light, I'd have been slain long ago. Just as Li Wuxiao was slithering over the ruins, a sudden streak of black light fell from the sky and landed before him, transforming into a black-robed man who stared at him in suspicion. Caught red-handed, Li Wuxiao did not panic. He lifted his snake head and looked straight at the man, only to hear him speak in a cold tone, "Fellow Taoist, which unit are you from, and why are you loitering here?" Since Li Wuxiao was covered in demonic chi and prowling the ruins, the man couldn't determine his allegiance. Who would guess a defeated straggler from Chengshui Tomb was still wandering the demon-blighted land? Chapter 831, In the Demonic Smoke, II. The thick demonic aura on the man clearly gave him away as a northern devil cultivator or rogue, so Li Wuxiao flicked his tongue and answered, "I am a protector under Master Monk King Heng of Yan State." "And what about you? What unit are you from to be prying this much?" The snake demon spoke with conviction, but inwardly grumbled, "Damn it. Using that monk's name again. I've practically been his mount these past months. What a disgrace." The man hesitated. Though most Buddhist cultivator forces were now centered around the way of emptiness, way of compassion, and way of virtue, representatives of all 7 northern sects had shown up. Who could say where this King Heng fit in? Still seeing the snake demon so confident, he replied coldly, "I've never heard of any master monk King Heng. Blind are you?" Li Wuxiao cursed aloud, slapped the ground with his tail. He pointed directly at him and roared, "My master is someone even Master Monk Yu Zin of the Great Desire sect begged in vain for a single debate. And you, a petty devil cultivator, dare bark at someone of such stature." Yu Zin had indeed led the initial assault on Mount Yan Pass as a master of the Tao of Great Desire, only to be repelled by Li Qinghong and others. The tale held truth, and with the black serpent holding his head high, his bearing was indeed quite intimidating. "This snake's mouth is vile," thought the devil cultivator. The devil cultivator was already half convinced once he heard the name Yu Zin, but being cursed so thoroughly still left him displeased. A trace of doubt lingered in his heart as he said coldly, "If you truly serve such a great master, you must be well versed in scripture." "Ha, you asked for this." Li Wuxiao sneered in response and began rapidly reciting the respected cultivator's subduing words that King Heng had once taught him. The cryptic and profound incantations echoed through the air. Combined with his earlier claims, it immediately made the devil cultivator in front of him flinch and panic. Plagued fool of a snake. Buddhist cultivators' scriptures were notoriously strange and unpredictable. The devil cultivator didn't want to risk getting converted mid-interrogation, so he hurled an insult to save face and quickly took to the wind, vanishing into the black mist. "Pa!" Li Wuxiao spat in the direction of his retreating figure and slithered back into the ruins. The man was likely one of the Foundation Establishment realm cultivators stationed here. After that little farce, it seemed he wouldn't be facing any more interference. Most of the devil cultivators stationed here withdrew after the incident at Chengshui Tomb, and that master monk also returned to the north. Otherwise, that guy wouldn't have been so easy to fool. Li Wuxiao had also seen the shimmering lights descending from the north. He wasn't surprised, but muttered inwardly, "Humans are so obsessed with appearances. If you want to kill, then just kill. Why the need for so many pretenses and disputes? They fight and struggle until they die, all for some hollow display." Li Wuxiao had seen plenty of this in the Eastern Sea. Whenever some dragon son from the water palaces needed an immortal foundation for alchemy or forging, the local demonic creatures simply lined up to be slaughtered. There was no need for wars or disputes, none of this endless back and forth. That said, Li Wuxiao still envied the refinement of inland cultivators. Even Purple Mansion realm cultivators had to feign civility when killing those at Foundation Establishment realm, and senseless slaughter was rarer. Life was far more comfortable that way. He lowered his head and moved through the ruins. Before long, he reached the place where he had once been stationed. After digging around for a bit, he unearthed a halberd. The halberd had a simple design and was remarkably light. Inscribed upon it were the words, "Li family of Qingdu, Chen family of Lijiang Chen Mufeng." So the kid died here after all. Li Wuxiao had met this man before, back when he was captured and brought to the Li family. Chen Mufeng had still been a boy then, and they'd crossed paths. Damn it. The snake demon scowled and pried up a few large stones. Sure enough, he found half of Chen Mufeng's skull. He dug up the other half from the soil. It was already rotted, so the snake demon wiped them clean, pieced them together, and stashed them in his storage pouch. Humans have a tradition of burying the dead. I'll bring it back for Chen Dong to give him a proper burial, thought Li Wushou. He blinked a few times, searched the area twice, and dragged out a few corpses of Li family members. Thankfully, he didn't recognize any of them. He stowed them all away and cursed, "Damn it," dying right on the spot. Now in human form, his eyelid twitched as he scanned the area again. He silently let out a breath of relief when there was no sign of Njayan's corpse. That guy had once worked alongside him mining beneath Moongaze Lake. He had always been smiling under his bald head, with a hearty appetite and a tendency to slack off, though he could run surprisingly fast. He looked around once more. There had also been a burly man wielding a golden hammer, probably named Li Wen, who was also missing. It was quite likely he had been reduced to ash, with his hammer taken by someone. As he made his way back, he found a few more corpses along the way and quietly gathered them up, thinking to himself, those guys from Moon Lake Peak of the Devil Gate. They probably ran the moment things turned bad, maybe not even fast enough to escape. He walked barefoot through the field, spotting familiar faces now and then, or what remained of them. Sometimes it was a nose he recognized, or half a rotted ear that looked vaguely familiar, lying discarded on the ground. Each time Li Wushou saw one, he swore under his breath. His muttering continued as he wandered through the gate, the curses growing quieter until at last the old snake fell silent. In all his years in the Eastern Sea, Li Wushou had never truly had friends. His kin considered his bloodline too lowly to speak to, and the other demon clans didn't even dare look him in the eye. It was only after arriving at the Li family that Li Wushou came to understand the concept of acquaintances and friends. Despite his foul mouth and gruff demeanor, people like Njayan and Chen Dong didn't mind him. Perhaps there had been some mutual benefit, but they treated him with camaraderie nonetheless. Li Yuexiang had been just a little girl. She was sweet and well-behaved. Xiao Giluan's children were all sharp and clever. Back then, Li Wushou had been assigned to guard her by Li Yunjiao. Li Yuexiang had always liked white dresses since she was young. She once told Li Wushou, "I usually stay on the mountain. Uncle Wushou, you don't have to wait on me all the time. If you come from the lake, I won't be waiting too long." In the blink of an eye, more than 20 years had passed. When Li Yunjiao had died, Li Xuanfeng had asked whether he wanted to stay with the Li family. Li Wushou hadn't dared make a peep in front of that man then, but if he were honest with himself, he had grown used to this kind of life, one where he didn't have to be constantly afraid and could speak his mind. Now his acquaintances had become corpses, scattered in pieces across the ground. Even in the cold weather, they were rotting badly. For the first time, Li Wushou furrowed his brow over a few mere Qi cultivation realm humans. The old snake wandered all the way to the collapsed formation center. His spiritual sense swept the ruins, and after rummaging for a bit, he suddenly caught sight of a broken sword. The broken sword was just over a foot long. A wooden charm dangled from its hilt, 1 palm long and 2 fingers wide, stained in dried black blood. Delicate and graceful words were written on it, "I've long awaited your return." Devil winds howled as the old snake glanced at the charm, then at the charred marks on the stone and the dark bloodstains. He stared for 2 seconds, then turned back to the charm and let out a raspy hiss, the choked, guttural sound unique to grieving serpents. Chapter 832, Great Ning Palace I. Li Wushou had his spirituality seized at an early age and was subsequently handed over to the Li family. Later, when Li Yunjiao died before he could transfer it, a wisp of the connection had been released. Later, Li Zijian had used the 6 Dams life-matching unique technique again, and the spirituality was first with Li Zijian, then quickly transferred to Li Yuexiang. There was a connection between him and the spirituality. Once the master died, the life-bound demonic creature would instantly perish. When he was with Li Yunjiao, he often used this link to find his way to Li Yunjiao upon being summoned. The Su state was in turmoil, so the connection couldn't be established, but if the spirituality had been extinguished, Li Wushou would have died instantly. Yet he had remained unharmed all along, and saw no sign of the spirituality being released and returning, so he felt secure and never truly considered that Li Yuexiang might be in trouble. "She must have transferred the spirituality in advance, that's why I didn't notice." At that moment, a wooden talisman floated by. Caught off guard, Li Wushou froze. The words "I've long awaited your return" caught his eye, making him bare his fangs and let out a furious roar. The demonic serpent swept his sleeve firmly, lifting a slab of broken stone to reveal scorched ashes that contained several delicate bone fragments. He reached out to brush away the ashes, staining his hand gray and black. Though the weather was cold, his palm felt scorching hot. After turning the ashes over a few times, he used mana to shake out a few fragments. The fragments had a porcelain-like texture with a faint red hue. Li Wushou exhaled, circulating his mana, and quickly pieced the fragments back into their original form. It was a red ceramic bead, covered in cracks. He recognized it as a personal belonging of Li Yuexiang, called Glazed Dusk. It had been seized by Li Yunjiao during an attack on the Li family by devil cultivators like Qiu Jai. Named by Li Qingheng, it had passed through many hands before ending up with Li Yuexiang. It served as a decent defensive Dharma artifact in the Qi cultivation realm. He gathered the fragments using mana. As someone from the Water Mansion lineage of Immortal Foundation, Li Wuxiao's power conflicted with the fire-virtue nature of glazed dusk, causing it to appear somewhat dim. The old serpent tucked the cracked glazed dusk into his robes, then took out a jade box to store the charred remains and bones. He hastily stowed the box into his storage pouch. He stood there, staring at his hand for 2 breaths. "Stupid thing," murmured Li Wuxiao. Li Wuxiao's eyes were gloomy as he stared at the blackened mark on his palm. He began peeling the ashes off bit by bit with mana, then carefully placed it back into the jade box. Changshui Tomb. The deep blue converging water gently rippled, reflecting the demonic clouds above. Several figures stood upon the clouds. Some of them were clad in golden robes, while others were in flowing black robes. Regardless, they all had an immortal bearing. 3 Taoist masters conversed quietly in the front while Li Xuanfeng stood with his bow. The misty blue clouds surrounding Si Boxiu wafted upward along his robes, and Li Xuanfeng felt waves of refreshing energy flow over him, gradually restoring his depleted mana. Li Xuanfeng had been waiting at Changshui Tomb for several days, while the Taoist masters meditated with their eyes closed. A few days passed in the blink of an eye to someone at the Foundation Establishment realm, let alone for Purple Mansion realm cultivators. A single blink might encompass entire cycles of day and night. When the Taoist masters began to speak, Li Xuanfeng knew the moment had come. Si Boxiu's cloud had already fully replenished his mana. A buzzing sound filled the air as a golden cloud flew out from the great void. A Taoist master stood on the golden cloud, hands clasped behind his back. His eyes were slightly narrowed, and he had a somewhat somber aura. Several young cultivators stood beside him, radiating glimmers of spiritual light. Fellow Taoist Tianyuan. Taoist Master Chang Yun called out, and Zhang Tianyuan landed before them, nodding toward Taoist Master Qiushui. He was none other than Taoist Master Tianyuan of the Golden Feather sect. Si Boxiu spoke softly. "Sorry to trouble you, fellow Taoist." 3 people descended from his cloud and stood beside Li Xuanfeng. There was 1 middle-aged man and 2 youths, all wearing the Azure Pond sect's robes. None appeared arrogant, and they nodded slightly toward Li Xuanfeng in greeting. The Golden Feather sect's territory now stretches from Yue State into central Wu State. Their current strength far surpasses the Azure Pond sect's. Li Xuanfeng thought to himself. The Golden Feather sect was at its peak. Qiushui and Tianyuan often traveled, laying out strategies everywhere. There were 2 other Taoist masters within the sect, one with the Tao title Tianhuo, under 200 years old and often in seclusion, and the other, Tiank, known for his violent temper, stationed in Wu State. The sect had many Foundation Establishment realm cultivators, notably Zhang Yun, who was famous even during his Foundation Establishment realm. He was now in seclusion for a breakthrough, reflecting a thriving, prosperous scene. In contrast, the Azure Pond sect had suffered nearly a century of turmoil under Kai Wei. The consequences were now clear. There was a dearth of strength. Kai Wei had fallen, Kai Buzi had disappeared, and both Yuan Wu and Yuan Su had perished. In just a few decades, they had lost 4 Purple Mansion realm cultivators. Once superior to Golden Feather sect, they had now fallen to the level of a mere average sect. As Li Xuanfeng's thoughts ran their course, he saw Taoist Master Chang Yun raise an eyebrow and say, "So it's the Gao family of Qi State who arrives first." As his voice faded, the great void before them split open, revealing a man whose attire was quite ornate. His upper garment was crisp and snow-white, while his lower robes were a vivid red. He also had a black cloak draped over his broad shoulders. He had a prominent nose and dark red eyes. Behind him stood another man in dark red and black robes, holding a cavalry lance. He was clearly Gao Fangjing from earlier. The man in front must be Gao Fu, the Bo Lai King who had forged his divine powers with true flame. Greetings to Bo Lai King. Yuan Ziu and the others treated him with due courtesy, greeting him one by one. Bo Lai King Gao Fu nodded solemnly in return, performing a meticulously formal northern salute as he said in a deep voice, "I am Gao Fu." Greetings to the esteemed Taoist masters. He had a handsome beard and thick brows with a broad and powerful chest. His garments were dignified, and surging true flame was suppressed within his eyes. He did not resemble a northern barbarian king, but rather a noble from the ancient Zhou dynasty famed for their mastery of fire virtue. Taoist masters Qiushui and Chang Yun nodded slightly. Bo Lai King stroked his beard and took a close look at Li Xuanfeng, tilting his head slightly as Gao Fangjing mouthed something softly behind him. Just as Bo Lai King Gao Fu arrived, several figures emerged from the great void. Most of them were shaped like vivid golden statues, some with 3 heads and 6 arms, while others had 5 eyes and 7 legs, covered densely with eyes. They radiated warm golden light, but had a solemn and majestic presence. Li Xuanfeng and Lingu Rao were not ignorant novices. They lowered their heads at once, avoiding the overwhelming golden light. The buzzing sound of scripture chanting was blocked by Si Boxiu's cloud, and then came a chuckle. Has everyone arrived? White Horse Temple has withdrawn. The rest are all here. Chapter 833, Great Ning Palace, II. After a short exchange between the voices, Bolai King Gao Fu, cultivator of true flame, stepped forward, stroking his beard, and said, I've long heard that Taoist Master Qiushui cultivates the whole pill Tao of lead and mercury. The transformations of elemental essence in this Tao are beyond us. Might we ask for a demonstration? Very well. Taoist Master Qiushui nodded gently. She raised a hand, palm up, and released two faint golden gleams. One ascended and transformed into brilliant golden light, while the other descended into vermilion red. She spoke softly. Azure and emerald blend as one, forming pure and bright converging water, capable of revealing the shattered remnants. She extended one finger forward and gently rested another finger upon it. The remaining 3 fingers were slightly curved as she pointed toward the dark blue converging water below, respectfully saying, Behold the radiance of the embraced supreme unity. Changshui Tomb had already been submerged by converging water. The terrain below them was especially low, with nothing left above the waterline. It looked like a small lake, the dark blue water opaque and jewel-like. But once the Taoist master gestured, the black clouds reflected on the water's surface began to shift. Li Xuanfeng looked closely and saw a broken cliff reflected in the water, with scattered pavilions and towers, and billowing white clouds drifting to and fro. The reflection grew increasingly vivid. The converging water beneath their feet had turned into a mirror, revealing a limited yet clear realm. Taoist Master Qiushui withdrew her hand and said softly, Let each of you send someone into the water. What a divine ability. Taoist Master Qiushui had performed this with effortless grace, without the slightest strain. Even after letting her hand fall, the reflection remained perfectly stable on the water's surface. The merciful ones remained silent, while only Bolai King Gao Fu praised, a most ingenious divine ability. Si Boxiu watched silently, tilting his head slightly before taking a golden talisman from his robe. It was only 2 fingers wide and etched densely with radiant markings. He handed it to Li Xuanfeng and said solemnly, This is the Summon Golden Talisman. It can summon golden energy to aid in battle, but lasts no more than an hour. Its effects may be weaker in this realm, so use it wisely. He turned around and pointed out the 3 behind him. This is Si Yuanli. These 2 are Kai Tianxing and Kai Fuju. Si Yuanli was the middle-aged man who was already at the late stage of the Foundation establishment realm. The other 2 were youths. Kai Tianxing had a calm demeanor and nodded politely, while Kai Fuju was equally well-mannered and pleasant in appearance. Yuan Ziu said gravely, Once he enters the water, I entrust his safety to you too. Lingu Rao and Li Xuanfeng immediately responded in unison, We obey the Taoist master's order. The group descended from the clouds into the water with a wave of Yuan Ziu's sleeve. Li Xuanfeng felt a moment of darkness followed by sudden brightness and then nothing beneath him. He channeled mana to ride the wind. Mist swirled ceaselessly below his feet. There was no sun or moon above, only an endless white haze. The black clouds, converging water, the merciful ones, and the Taoist masters were all gone, leaving only vast skies and a chilling wind rushing toward him. Looking into the distance, he saw a cliff rising steeply into the sky, adorned with staggered pavilions and towers. Ning State favored deep blues and glazed jewels, so it was no surprise to see these buildings constructed with black and dark blue hues. Colored glass twinkled in the distance, presenting a scene of rich splendor. Li Xuanfeng paused briefly and looked around, but only found Si Yuanli beside him. The middle-aged man was riding the wind, surveying the area. His green robe fluttered, and a jade-green longsword had already appeared in his hand. Seeing Li Xuanfeng looking over, he cupped his fists and said, Apologies for the trouble, fellow Taoist. Yuan Ziu clearly has his own agenda. Li Xuanfeng didn't need to think long. Lingu Rao was certainly with the 2 Kai family members and had separated the moment they entered the realm, leaving him with Si Yuanli. Li Xuanfeng found it hard to believe that this wasn't orchestrated by Si Boxiu. He returned the gesture and the 2 descended into the clouds. After observing for a while, Li Xuanfeng felt that this strange place resembled neither a grotto heaven nor a sealed world. He asked softly, Do you know where this is, fellow Taoist? This is the Great Ning Palace. Since Si Yuanli would need to rely on him later, he spoke with a gentle demeanor and answered thoroughly, It's not comparable to the grotto heavens of true monarchs, though the naming conventions are quite complex. Some called palaces, others halls, caves, or chambers. The immortal mansions once had a formal system to classify such cave dwellings. He paused for a moment, noting they still had some distance to descend, then continued in a quiet voice, To be precise, it was the dwelling of Purple Mansion realm cultivators. In ancient times, spiritual energy was abundant and the world was more complete. My family's Taoist master says it was a time of complete surplus in all things, with treasures everywhere. True monarchs and Taoist masters of those eras far surpassed those of today, and there were many who had mastered their divine ability. Power resided with multiple Taoist masters, not just one per faction. When they combined their divine abilities, these figures could create dwellings on Dharma artifacts or spirit items that were either large or small. Though not as refined as grotto heavens hidden in the Great Void, they had their own wonders. The Great Ning Palace is one such example. Li Xuanfeng thoughtfully looked down at the mountains beneath his feet and asked, "It's really that vast? That doesn't seem right." The realm before him stretched beyond sight, making Li Xuanfeng suspicious. If every Purple Mansion realm cultivator had such abilities, Azure Pond Sect and Golden Feather Sect would have countless such domains, yet he had never heard of them. Yuan Su hadn't even mentioned it. Something felt off, and he stared intently ahead, very perceptive. Yuanli secretly sighed in his heart, but he maintained a smile as he replied, "You're right. After the changes in heaven and earth, constructing a dwelling with divine arts has become immensely difficult for Purple Mansion realm cultivators. In ancient times, 3 or 5 of them could build a small immortal palace. Nowadays, it might take more than a dozen. Aside from the likes of the Wang, Zai, and Nuoxia families, who across the land still has that kind of power. What's more, today's immortal palaces are said to be cramped and unimpressive. Few Purple Mansion realm cultivators are willing to pay the cost. As for the Great Ning Palace before us," Yuanli continued softly, "it was constructed in ancient times with the aid of Anhui Heaven, anchored to a grotto heaven rather than stored within a Dharma artifact or spirit item. Then a true monarch intervened, which made it possible for such a vast territory to be formed. However, now that it's been opened and connected to the present world, it will begin to collapse within a few months and vanish completely." The two finally reached the ground and landed upon pale blue lake water. The blue-black stones beneath were clearly visible. Shallow waters stretched away on both sides, presenting a picturesque scene. The Taoist masters have plotted so carefully because they hope to trace the remains of Anhui Heaven. While there are many grotto heavens in northern Jiangnan, such as the once famous Donghua Heaven of the Yuan Prefecture, Anhui Heaven was among the wealthiest. Yuanli's personality, unlike his Taoist masters, was gentle and chatty. He smiled and said, "My elder brother is Yuanbai. He was once a Sword Immortal's disciple and had close ties with your esteemed family." "I see." Li Xuanfeng nodded slightly in acknowledgement. As they flew, they passed a green stone sculpture of a flying fish spouting water every half a kilometer. After dozens of kilometers, they finally saw a long, orderly jade road stretching over the lake. It was black on the outside and white within. The seamless road extended far into the distance. What a splendid view. Li Xuanfeng's own home lay by Moongaze Lake, and his family soon to become the sole ruling clan in that region. So when he saw this immortal palace of Ning State, he nodded silently in approval. Yuanli, however, could hardly wait. He picked up speed along the road, his blue robe fluttering as he said with a laugh, "Fellow Taoist Xuanfeng, Ning State is famed for its mastery of true qi, and the Jiazhong Li family even supported the nation. There must be many treasures here, we must hurry on." Chapter 834, Painted Panels I. Li Xuanfeng frowned slightly at his demeanor. Watching Yuanli fly ahead at great speed without the slightest caution, he thought to himself, does this man have some hidden backing and thus such confidence? Or has he simply lived too long under the protection of a Taoist master and grown naive and careless? The Xi family was low-key and reserved within the sect, and Li Xuanfeng had rarely encountered them. He had never interacted with Yuanli before, nor even heard his name. Most likely, he was a rash type who might end up dragging others down with him. Li Xuanfeng followed closely, golden bow in hand, his tiger-like eyes scanning the surroundings. He activated his perception technique and swept his gaze across the lake's scenery. After just a dozen breaths of flight, they saw the vague silhouette of a blue palace floating on the water, with a faint golden light hovering above it. A Buddhist cultivator. The golden glow of a Buddhist cultivator was easy to recognize. Yuanli identified it at a glance, his face twisting in disdain. He looked toward Li Xuanfeng and muttered, "Brother Xuanfeng, don't let him take the lead." Li Xuanfeng naturally wasn't afraid of offending a Buddhist cultivator. The golden string of his bow hummed as a golden arrow leapt from his waist. He gathered astral qi with the swift precision of long practice. The bowstring thrummed, and when he relaxed his fingers, a burst of petal-like energy scattered the golden light in the distance. "Damn you, what foul demon dares use sorcery against this old monk?" A stern voice rang out from the golden light as a figure leapt upward. Li Xuanfeng and Yuanli arrived in a flash. Li Xuanfeng's gaze locked coldly onto the old monk within the light, raising his golden bow and aiming it at him. This old monk. The monk's eyes were dark and filled with blazing fury, but the moment they met Li Xuanfeng's icy gaze, his tone immediately softened. His fierce expression turned to fear as he exclaimed, "Li Xuanfeng, I, this humble monk, has no wish to feud with fellow Taoist. This destiny belongs to you." He vanished into his golden light, fleeing in a puff of smoke and leaving behind a trail of flower-like energy. Clearly, he was too injured to even conceal his wounds. The glow on Li Xuanfeng's bow slowly faded. Since he did not know how many more fights awaited here, he chose not to waste more mana on the wretch. Si Yuanli glanced sideways at him, pausing for a full breath before saying, "Taoist, brother Xuanfeng, after you." The two descended together, landing before the palace. Si Yuanli waved his sleeve and pushed the doors open. The grand hall had a large table that was flanked by several jade chairs. The setting was lavish yet elegant, with an antique incense burner placed in the middle. The whole picture was immaculate and exuded ancient charm. Profound. Si Yuanli had just begun to speak when he saw Li Xuanfeng calmly say, "Make haste, fellow Taoist, gather what you need and head for the center at once." "All right," replied Si Yuanli. Si Yuanli paused briefly, then briskly walked along the corridor above the water. Li Xuanfeng watched as his spiritual sense quickly swept through the entire hall. Dharma artifacts floated into the air one by one, streaming colorful light as they flew straight into his storage pouch. Each item was collected without pause and stuffed into the pouch with single-minded focus. Li Xuanfeng immediately gained some insight into this man's temperament. He raised his hand and looked toward the central screen of the hall. It had a painting of an armored man, gripping a strange beast in each hand, turning his head to look outward with bold heroism. The screen itself was quite ordinary, and there was nothing unusual about it except for the impressive figure depicted. Off to the side was a line of small characters, written in elegant calligraphy. "Emperor Liang founds his nation a gift to brother Jiang." At the end was a signature, Chen Xuanli. Li Xuanfeng looked at it with mild interest and casually picked it up. Just then Si Yuanli finished collecting the hall's treasures and hurried over, glancing at the object in his hands and asked, "Fellow Taoist, that is." "It looked interesting, so I took it," replied Li Xuanfeng. Then he tucked it away with a flip of his hand. The two immediately lifted off, riding the wind at full speed toward the center. The lake scenery below rushed past them, and after about 10 seconds, another palace came into view. This palace was even smaller than the last, yet Si Yuanli descended eagerly. Li Xuanfeng could only follow. A quick scan of the interior with his spiritual sense confirmed that it was indeed completely empty. Si Yuanli looked visibly disappointed. Li Xuanfeng turned to him and said quietly, "No need to dwell on it, fellow Taoist. Most of these palaces have likely already been visited. We shouldn't delay, let's head straight for the central cliff. If we wait any longer, there may be nothing left for us." Si Yuanli rose into the air with him, showing a trace of hesitation as if troubled by something. After a few seconds, he nodded and sighed. "You're right, fellow Taoist, let's move quickly." Though Li Xuanfeng kept his eyes fixed ahead, he noted Si Yuanli's expression and grew thoughtful. The two streaked through the air, their flight light trailing behind them like long flames as they raced toward the cliff. About 15 minutes later, the cliff appeared before them. Li Xuanfeng could vaguely see figures already descending and silently nodded to himself, thinking, the Great Ning Palace may be vast, but it's still nothing like a true grotto heaven. These cultivators aren't ordinary folk. Wherever they go, it's like locusts sweeping the land. Not even 15 minutes has passed since we entered, and already only the mountaintop palaces remain to be plundered. There would definitely be a fight atop the mountain. That would be the real climax of this grotto heaven. Gone were the days of leisurely exploration, when days might pass without running into another soul. From what he'd seen along the way, he now understood that perhaps due to changes in the world, interference from a Purple Mansion realm cultivator, or some other issue, none of the Great Ning Palace's formations had activated. They were all just decorations, leaving cultivators free to come and go as if strolling through their own backyard. This cliff was the heart of the Great Ning Palace. It was the most critical area. Yet as he looked up, he saw only a sparse few flickers of light across the mountainside, no more than could be counted on one hand. Dim and faint, they looked like they could be resolved with just a few arrows. This is far too easy. It's nothing like Green Pine Temple's Mirage Mirror Heaven. All the main heirs of the noble families have their methods. Everything has been laid out in advance by the Purple Mansion realm cultivators. The true contest lies in the battles between them. He drew his bow and descended with Si Yuanli, sweeping his spiritual sense across the air. The mountain was covered in verdant blue palaces. They chose one nearby to land upon. Si Yuanli followed in haste, finally showing a hint of caution. Li Xuanfeng stepped into the hall, his expression instantly chilling as a dense wave of spiritual energy rushed toward him. The formation core at the center of the hall was steadily releasing spiritual qi. It was so thick it had condensed into minor pure spiritual qi, spilling outward in a rush of pure white mist. Around the formation core stood 4 large cauldrons, each venting white mist. Treasures filled the space and jade thrones gleamed with grandeur. A massive yet exquisitely carved immortal throne rested above, flanked by 6 green square cauldrons filled with various spirit items. 2 of the cauldrons near the steps had already been overturned, lying scattered on their sides. Their contents clattered and rolled across the floor, radiant treasures casting dazzling multicolored light. It was almost too bright to look at. Several cultivators stood in confrontation within the hall, but Li Xuanfeng's gaze swept past them entirely, landing instead on the screen behind the immortal throne. The screen had a faint green glow. Made of a dim, deep green material, its borders were lined with intricate runic designs. There were 8 panels in total, and they blocked spiritual sense, preventing any glimpse of what lay behind. The screen seemed to have a strange allure that instantly captured his attention. The 8 interlinked panels formed a great hall of their own that was visually disorienting. Li Xuanfeng hadn't even had time to examine it closely when he was rooted in place by the overwhelming sense of familiarity it evoked. Chapter 835, Painted Panels II. This is. The intense sense of déjà vu stirred unease within him. He was sure he'd never seen it before, yet the ancient style felt intimately familiar. His gaze followed the panels to the final one. It depicted the outside of the hall, where a man stood with his ear tilted as if listening. At that moment, Li Xuanfeng's mind roared with realization, and he finally remembered why it felt so familiar. He had seen that very view before, the painting of black-green winds, the swaying pine forest amidst the heavy abyssal gale. Chang'eming Hall. These panels depict the 6 sons of Chang'eming. He quickly withdrew his gaze, feigning nonchalance as he scanned the hall again. The cultivators inside had all turned to look at him. Some were cloaked in eerie demonic energy, while others were wreathed in true flame or bathed in Buddhist radiance. All of their eyes now locked firmly on him. Li Xuanfeng's gray eyes narrowed slightly as he met their gazes without hesitation, showing no concern for the warning in their stares. He was regally composed as he stepped forward into the hall with one hand gripping his bow and the other held behind his back. Si Yuanli followed close behind, visibly tense. His longsword shimmered with brilliance. It was practically pressed against his armor as he stared fixedly at the 4 central cauldrons. So its fellow Taoist Xuanfeng. The tension in the hall lingered until someone finally spoke. Gao Fangjing of the True Flame lineage was clad in his dark red robe and wielding a horse lance. Many of the devil and Buddhist cultivators had already been eyeing him with suspicion due to his attire. But when they heard the cautious tone in Gao Fangjing's voice, their gazes gradually shifted away, pretending to focus on one another instead. Li Xuanfeng had taken roughly 15 minutes to obliterate Murong Wu in both body and soul, shatter Yu Qian's Dharma body, and tear apart a demonic creature with his bare hands. The ensuing rain of blood had deeply shocked the northern devil cultivators. Then he had even forced his way into Buddhist territory and slain Tang Shedu, catapulting his reputation to its peak. Many of the devil cultivators hadn't seen him in person, but they had all heard the name. None of them wanted to face him directly. Gao Fangjing glanced around the room, true flame burning steadily across his body before finally speaking. There's no need to delay, fellow cultivators. More are on their way. If we wait too long, no matter how powerful we are, how much can we seize, and how many wounds will we suffer in the process? As his voice fell, Gao Fangjing raised his lance high and grinned. Now that fellow Taoist Xuanfeng is here, we have 8 present. How about one-on-one duels, each to claim a cauldron? His words were blunt, completely disregarding Si Yuanli's presence. The latter made as if to speak, only for Li Xuanfeng to extend an arm in his defense and say softly, "Just focus on protecting yourself, fellow Taoist." Before he could finish, a burst of brilliance erupted in the hall. Li Xuanfeng took a step forward and reached for the nearest cauldron, only to find with a raised brow that no one dared challenge him for it. Instead, 2 nearby devil cultivators exchanged glances and suddenly launched their assault. One unleashed thick purple qi, the other rose in swirling demonic smoke. Together they encircled Gao Fangjing, whose body blazed with true flame as thunderous explosions erupted. "So we meet again." Li Xuanfeng saw clearly as he hoisted the cauldron. It was a deep bluish green, warm to the touch, and covered in opulent, ornate patterns of birds and beasts. There were dragons and phoenixes dancing across its surface. One of the 2 attacking Gao Fangjing was cultivating purple essence. He was a devil cultivator named Murong Gong, whom Li Xuanfeng had briefly fought days before. His form was hidden in a purple mist as a swirl of demonic light surged around him. "Ha ha ha!" Gao Fangjing burst into furious laughter. His lance flared with scorching true flame, emitting dazzling golden-red light as he bellowed, "Murong, you vile old cur. I knew you'd pull something like this." 7 elite Foundation establishment cultivators were now locked in battle, unleashing deafening blasts. Golden and white lights flashed as immortal and demonic energies surged and clashed, yet the grand hall stood firm, immovable as a mountain. Boom. As they exchanged blows, more massive booms echoed from afar. The entire Great Ning Palace immediately erupted into chaos in a chain reaction. Places that had been still and silent suddenly burst into action. Spiritual energy twisted and churned violently. Li Xuanfeng weighed the cauldron, which emanated a subtle mystical glow in his hand. The lid was tightly sealed and immovable. Even his spiritual sense couldn't penetrate it. There seemed to be another world within, so it couldn't be stored in a pouch. He had little interest in the cauldron. Whatever treasure was inside, it was unlikely to end up fully in his possession, but Si Yuanli's eyes were practically glued to it. Li Xunfeng casually handed it to him and said softly, "Stay close." Si Yuanli nodded eagerly, his joy almost spilling off his face. He showed not a hint of refusal, murmuring gratefully, "Fellow Taoist, your generosity is unmatched. I'll surely speak well of you before my ancestor. When we leave this grotto heaven, you'll be handsomely rewarded." Li Xunfeng responded nonchalantly, his spiritual sense silently locked on the screen behind the immortal throne. He paid no mind to Si Yuanli's flattery. Perhaps affected by the surrounding demonic and dharma light, the dim dark green screen now gleamed with a richer hue, like an aged bronze. It stood firm behind the hall, unshaken by the residual waves of mana still rippling through the space. Li Xunfeng hesitated no longer. His gaze didn't even linger on the mountainous piles of treasure below. He soared toward the throne, reaching for the screen. Li Xunfeng's eyes narrowed. Platinum lines suddenly lit up on his chin, flowing downward across his chest, forming the sleek and elegant heavenly gilded helm. His eyes glowed faintly as he focused with intense concentration. Benefactor. A figure suddenly appeared before him, calmly blocking his path. It was a burly man with long, narrow brows and a clean-shaven head. He wore a golden cassia and gazed at him with gentle eyes. "This humble monk has long heard of your name and held you in deep admiration. But fate conspired against us, keeping our paths apart, until now." Li Xunfeng glared coldly, saying nothing. He had already raised his golden bow. Golden light surged forth as 5 arrows leapt onto the string. A sharp hum filled the great hall, silencing every cultivator in the room. Clang. Chapter 836, Yuanli I. Li Xunfeng had risen to great fame during a north-south conflict. His reputation had spread beyond Jiangbei, and even the powers between Yan and Zhao had heard of him and knew his name. This reputation had been forged through slaying Murong Wu and shattering Yu Qian's Dharma body. So, while he was renowned, he had also offended more northern Dao lineages than he could count on both hands. The lofty purple mansion realm cultivators and Mahas might not care, but killing direct descendants, those with ties of blood and interest, had vaguely but surely offended a great number of northern cultivators. Li Xunfeng understood the grudges he had accumulated. Now he no longer cared which northern Dao he offended. Whenever he struck, it was with full force, buzzing through the air. The Buddhist cultivator before him was somewhat unusual. He lacked any sinister aura, and was instead somewhat similar to Lujin of the great Mahayana Dharma realm. His Dharma light was much gentler and nearly approached King Heng in purity. The monk didn't appear evil, but blocking his path without cause was enough reason not to hold back. As soon as this Buddhist cultivator appeared, Li Xunfeng merged 5 arrows into one and shot it straight at his Dharma body. Buzz. A burst of golden brilliance exploded before Li Xunfeng, falling like scattered sparks. Sharp, piercing cries echoed like shattered metal. The burly man before him lit up, golden cassia draped over his shoulders. He said with a smile, "This humble monk is Jayana. I've long heard of your immortal arrows, benefactor. After much contemplation, I found this method to counter them. I was waiting precisely for your golden arrow." He had already rolled up his sleeves and now raised the entire dazzling golden cassia high, displaying the side interwoven with brilliant patterns. Circular gold discs adorned it, emitting curling white smoke and golden mist as he chanted scripture, "Come, venerable great capacity, heaven receive." He spoke Sanskrit, and the layered golden mesh of the cassia lit up with him. It was bright and immaculate, as if containing endless space within, flowing with golden mantra patterns. The golden light of the arrow buzzed in the air, then fell into the cassia. Jayana's veins bulged as he gripped its corners and pulled his arms down. The golden cassia floated midair, wrapping tightly around something. A massive bulge inside twisted and jumped violently, like a furious wild snake trapped within, struggling with all its might. Jayana's face flushed red as he shouted, "Seal." All of his mana surged into the cassia, and he actually managed to restrain the force for a moment. The slender, eyebrows, bald monk revealed countless pale golden scriptures across his scalp. "This." Si Yuanli stood behind Li Xunfeng, eyes fixed on the cassia. A trace of concern rose in his heart as he held the large cauldron in his hands, truly strange. It's like a unique Dharma artifact combined with a matching spell, specifically designed to counter flying objects like this. Looks like this bald donkey is no simple figure. Not sure if Li Xunfeng can suppress him. He lowered his eyes thoughtfully. He was not as helpless as he appeared. The green sword at his waist twitched, its blade already secretly aimed at the monk. When Master Monk Jayana managed to subdue the golden light, a hint of pride surfaced on his face. His thin brows arched as he lifted and flicked his hands, trying to redirect the golden light elsewhere when he heard a deep, iron-like voice, quite bold. A sudden piercing screech rang in his ears, and his whole body seized up. The fierce man clad in golden soft armor had already appeared before him, the golden bow glowing brilliantly on his back. Master Monk Jaina recoiled in shock and cried out, "You!" Li Xunfeng had only been 3 meters away. It was just a single step for him. The monk, however, had been too arrogant and focused entirely on guarding against the next arrow. He never expected this move. His tiger eyes slightly opened, and his terrifying gray pupils flashed. One hand grabbed the monk's neck, and the other yanked on his dazzling Cassia Dharma artifact. Platinum light gleamed from both arms as he exhaled sharply. Ha! Crack! Jaina struggled twice, flailing in place, but his neck was crushed like brittle wood, producing a series of crisp cracks. But the moment Li Xunfeng had appeared in front of him, his head had already rolled off his shoulders and shot through the air to flee. The Cassia dimmed and burst into golden light across the sky. An instant later, Li Xunfeng's fist pierced through his chest, bursting out from his back in a spray of multicolored brilliance. The muffled sound was not loud, but it was especially jarring. Jaina's body slumped like mud, while his head darted nearly half a kilometer away, looking back in terror. The man brushed the golden light away with one hand, dispersing it into nothingness. 5 spiritual arrows emerged from the glow, lining up in a row and swimming around his palm like 5 obedient golden-scaled fish. Li Xunfeng glanced coldly at the head in the distance and spoke in an icy tone, "Go, Buzz." The 5 streaks of golden light vanished instantly from his palm. Before Master Monk Jaina could speak, pain exploded through his organs, leaving him reeling. He forced himself to cast a spell and yanked out the gleaming Cassia. But how could this hastily conjured Cassia compare to the one he had prepared earlier? It lasted only a second before the arrows tore into it like a fierce wolf bursting into a straw hut and scattered it to the skies. Soft, colorful petals rained down from the air, fluttering in every shade. The 5 golden arrows reappeared at Li Xunfeng's side, while Master Monk Jaina vanished without a trace. Li Xunfeng raised a sharp brow, unhurried. His gray eyes glinted with sarcasm as he spoke softly. Since fellow Taoist was so eager to fight, why retreat at the last moment and leave without a word? A golden-red arrow had long been waiting, and it leaped eagerly onto his bowstring. Li Xunfeng's gray eyes sharpened as he drew his bow back to its maximum and aimed into the distant north. Fall. As soon as the words left his mouth, the golden-red arrow vanished from the string. In the distance, radiant light exploded across the sky. Sizzling candle-like flames rained down, dancing on the lake's surface before plunging deep into its waters. The sound of blood being spat drifted back to Li Xunfeng on the wind. Many cultivators stood in the air, their expressions varied, but when he glanced down at them, they all quickly averted their gazes, avoiding eye contact. Truly living up to his name, that monk was naive. He ended up as a laughingstock. Only then did the glow on Li Xunfeng's bow begin to dim, and the platinum patterns on his face gradually faded away. Si Yuanli hurried over and asked in a low voice, "Brother Xunfeng, did that bald monk Jaina die?" Chapter 837, Yuanli II. Jaina was clearly an elite among Buddhist cultivators, with little distinction between his methods of escape and survival. His aura was somewhat similar to the ancient sects of Buddhism, and his spells lacked any sinister traits. Thus, Li Xunfeng had held back and hadn't struck to kill in the end. Though he had secretly held back, his display was impressive enough to intimidate the devil cultivators around them. He casually walked down to stand before the 6 square cauldrons. Gazing at the dazzling treasures, he spoke softly to those behind him, "Go ahead." Li Xunfeng stood alone beneath the immortal seat. The surrounding devil cultivators hovered in the air, too afraid to fly closer, though their greedy and reluctant gazes were apparent. Si Yuanli swallowed hard while staring at the cauldrons and replied, "Brother Xunfeng, how could I have the nerve to take more? The best treasures have already landed in my hands. You decide what to take." Li Xunfeng was surprised, causing him to glance at them. Looking at the man's honest and sincere appearance, Li Xunfeng casually waved his hand, taking only 2 layers of the spirit items from the ground. The dark green-black screen naturally fell into his hand as well. Then, without lingering, Li Xunfeng took flight with Si Yuanli. Behind them, the devil cultivators could no longer restrain themselves. Chaos erupted atop the great hall in a thunderous clash. Naturally, Li Xunfeng hadn't taken everything in one go. He watched coldly as the devil and Buddhist cultivators broke out into a brawl. Even the 7 cultivators within the central hall had settled their fights. Several dark lights fled in disgrace and scattered across the sky. Murong Gong. A thunderous shout echoed across the sky. Torrents of true flame surged into the sky, golden red light shooting up into the heavens and raining down as sheets of fire. Though the flames started as gold and crimson, they turned dark red midway down, sizzling as they scorched the air. Gao Fangjing emerged from the great hall in a dark red robe, his face flowing with flame, hands entwined in raging fire like a demon god. A flickering violet light leapt feebly away and Gao Fangjing laughed wildly. "Come now. Old dog Murong, bark one more time for Grandpa, would you? Still have time to talk now." His strength was truly overwhelming. He had beaten Murong Gong and the devil cultivator into a sorry state, sending both fleeing in different directions. The watching cultivators all glanced sideways as he pursued them wielding his lance, flames trailing across the sky. Li Chunfeng glanced around, and Si Yuanli's soft voice reached his ear. "Brother Chunfeng, what now?" Si Yuanli's earlier words had left Li Chunfeng unsure of his temperament, so he simply answered softly, "I leave it to you, fellow Taoist." Si Yuanli gripped the great cauldron tightly. He understood better than the others what lay within it. His hands clutched the green rim so hard they turned pale, and his expression grew grave as he thought to himself, but the location is wrong. The Taoist master once said something from my family was inside a small hall in the lake, but we've already missed it. The Taoist masters are watching from the surface, and I can't afford to act too obviously. Earlier I gave it back to Li Chunfeng to avoid drawing ire, which might have raised his suspicions. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. So far he's one of us. If I can go with the flow, this might turn out better for me. Though he was troubled inwardly, his face remained puzzled and hesitant as he shook his head and replied, "Why don't we find another place to rest and wait for the Taoist master to summon us out?" Li Chunfeng heard him clearly, but didn't believe him in the slightest. This only confirmed his suspicions. The Si family is discreet, not foolish. I've never heard of this Si Yuanli, but Master Yuan Ziu gave me that monarch calling command golden talisman in secret. There must be a reason for it. If this matter was so easily resolved, why would he give me a purple mansion realm talisman? Moreover, Yuan Ziu is famed for his expertise in talismans, so this one isn't ordinary. He wouldn't give it away without cause. There must be a scheme here. Whatever he asks next, I'll protect and follow. As Si Yuanli turned toward him, Li Chunfeng didn't overthink it and responded softly, "I'll follow your lead, fellow Taoist." Si Yuanli nodded quickly, looking every bit the timid and meek figure, and answered, "There are many northern cultivators here. Though Brother Chunfeng is strong and fears none, there may still be strange methods difficult to guard against. It would be unwise to linger too long." There were many small halls on the lake we passed by along the way earlier. While they may not hold anything valuable, they're safe and easy to access. Why not go take a look? Li Chunfeng responded with a grunt, immediately understanding. So that's why this old fox looked so reluctant earlier and acted like he was trading sesame for a watermelon. It turns out the item his Taoist master mentioned is in one of those lake halls. The thought flashed through his mind. Si Yuanli truly played the part of a timid man to perfection. When their eyes happened to meet, his look of fear was flawlessly acted. Since he had kept up the act this far, Li Chunfeng played along, frowning deeply as he said, "I've been tasked to protect you, so naturally I'll follow wherever you go." Si Yuanli chuckled awkwardly and quickly fled the cliffside at the center of the battlefield with Li Chunfeng. A few devil and Buddhist cultivators still trailed them from afar, their eyes glinting with hesitation. Si Yuanli drew his green sword and let out a relieved expression. He's a fine warrior. He's strong, flexible, socially adept, and able to read the times. No wonder the Purple Mansion realm cultivators favor him so much. A golden bow indeed, and very useful. He looked left and right while scanning the lake for palaces. He even had the spare attention to run through his thoughts again. No wonder Taoist Master Yuan Su married his family's daughter to him and held him in such regard. After Yuan Su's death, our own master took him in without delay. Yu Su is greedy, selfish, and even ignores even his kin. Lingu Rao is formidable, but his family is too deeply tied to the great Ziyuqi temple. Only this one is capable, values loyalty, and is easy to coerce. If I were a Purple Mansion realm cultivator, I'd use him too. Si Yuanli paused slightly as a small palace appeared on the surface of the lake below them. He quickly gathered his thoughts and feigned surprise, looking up and asking, "People are still out here looting. Just so you know, not every faction sent their core disciples inside. Some lacked the strength and stayed at the periphery early on to collect spirit items and treasures. It's not a bad strategy." Since Si Yuanli was continuing to play his role, Li Chunfeng responded offhandedly. His gaze swept across the devil cultivator below, then suddenly narrowed as he murmured, "Hem." A certain devil cultivator below them had a cold face and held a sinister demon blade. His tall nose and deep eye sockets marked him as one of the northernmost cultivators. He was most likely from either South or North Mobai, with Hu or Jai ancestry almost certainly in the mix. Though he had never seen this man before, Li Chunfeng found his attire and bearing strikingly familiar to a description he'd heard in the past. He stared quietly, and the golden bow behind him suddenly leaped into his hand. What a coincidence. I searched for him many times amid all the devilish smoke and battles without luck, yet here he is, right inside the great Ning Palace. After all, the man below was a devil cultivator. Si Yuanli didn't find it strange that Li Chunfeng took up his bow, but when he saw how solemn his expression was, he assumed it must be a formidable foe and asked softly, "Brother Chunfeng, who is that?" Chapter 838, Taking Action I. Hold on, fellow Taoist. Li Chunfeng gave no further reply. The black-clad youth below was extremely alert. He merely glanced once up at them and instantly stirred up devil winds, his robe billowing as he fled in the opposite direction. If he was not struck down in time, he could become a future threat. Li Xunfeng drew back his bowstring and a golden arrow settled onto the string. The youth below immediately felt his ears ring, dread flooding his heart as his body trembled with instinctive alarm. Their eyes had met earlier. Li Xunfeng's perception technique had pierced through the black mist on the youth's face and saw his features clearly. The youth had also seen his features. The moment he saw that bow in Li Xunfeng's hand, he prepared to flee, with high alert in his heart. Now, understanding dawned upon him like a plunge into an icy lake. He shuddered inwardly. That's the Bianyan's immortal bow, Li Xunfeng. This youth was none other than Helian Changguang of Taifo State, the one who had fought Li Qingheng during the Devil Plague. Back then, Li Qingheng had slain the female cultivator at his side and obtained a Dharma robe which had later been forged into the cyan sparrow plume. She had once worried over it and specifically mentioned it to Li Xunfeng. As Li Xunfeng loosed an arrow, thoughts raced through Helian Changguang's mind like lightning. He quickly made a judgment in his heart. Seems the small hall I was heading toward has already caught their eyes. This arrow is to block me. So he immediately leaped away from the hall, not hoping to dodge the ghost-like arrow, but fully presenting a posture of retreat. Devil smoke churned beneath his feet as he stepped back twice. Pain bloomed in his chest and he coughed up blood. Though Helian Changguang was Taifo State royalty, their nation was already weak and in recent years had suffered a severe decline in talent. Things had gotten so bad that a mere mid-stage foundation establishment realm cultivator like him had been sent out. Clearly, there was no one else to use. Helian Changguang had been constantly on edge during this whole foray. Any random cultivator around him would at least be in late-stage foundation establishment realm, and many even stronger. Just now, he had merely clashed with a single devil and had nearly been killed. He was a naturally cautious man. He couldn't see where the arrow came from nor where it would go. All he felt was a numbness and pain, and suddenly a gaping hole had opened in his chest. Terror consumed him. To have such a towering reputation, he truly is exceptional. When weapon mastery reaches its peak, it births intent. This man surely possesses arrow intent. He had no intention of entangling himself with Li Xunfeng. He immediately turned to flee, pulling out a life-saving talisman as black energy ignited around his body. He muttered under his breath, translucent blood-silver technique, but Li Xunfeng only drew nearer. The first arrow returned to his bowstring and another leaped up from his waist. He pulled the string taut once more. Strike! In the distance, the black-clad youth's head exploded like a watermelon, releasing a cloud of blood mist. His hands clawed at where his head had been, and his headless body panicked further, transforming into a streak of devil light and fleeing at top speed. He really means to kill me. Helian Changguang couldn't guess Li Xunfeng's thoughts. He poured all of his mana and blood essence into his spell. He pushed the translucent blood-silver technique to its limit, forming a silver-red aura that worked to expel as much of the astral chi from his body as possible. Helian Changguang's translucent blood-silver technique was a secret method of the whole Pill Dao. Perhaps it was the outer world's chi or the nature of the secret realm, but its power had inexplicably increased. He coughed up a blood arrow, but it was shredded by astral chi before it could touch the ground. This surprised Li Xunfeng. His astral chi had been refined through a combination of spiritual orifices and lifelong cultivation, and was now enhanced by 2 immortal foundations. Its power was terrifying. Once someone was infected by his astral chi, it clung like a bone-rotting parasite. It would bind to one's mana and once inside the body would take years to purge. It was not something a simple blood cough could resolve. Perhaps his spell art is truly extraordinary, thought Li Xunfeng. Li Xunfeng didn't recognize his immortal foundation, but beside him, Si Yuanli gave a soft exclamation of surprise. Li Xunfeng's waist quivered as 3 more arrows jumped up. His vigilance had deepened. According to Qingheng's description, this man is cautious, capable, ruthless, and decisive. That seems entirely accurate. Though his cultivation is still shallow, he's already able to dissolve my astral chi. His technique must be marvelous. He's simply not strong enough to unleash its full potential. Someone like him mustn't be allowed to escape. I must not be careless. It's better to eliminate him early and avoid future trouble. He drew his golden bow to a full moon curve. 5 arrows circled the bow but did not touch the string. Instead, a gold-red arrow darted from his waist like a swimming fish and settled obediently on the bow. Clang! A burst of golden-red light erupted in the distance. Si Yuanli felt a sudden gust of wind sting his face and couldn't help but glance at the middle-aged man beside him in astonishment. Brother Xunfeng, isn't that a bit much to kill a chicken with an ox blade? His only answer was a buzzing sound, as Li Xunfeng vanished from his side. When Si Yuanli looked up, he saw that while Helian Changguang's devil light was fast, it was not nearly fast enough to outpace the arrow. He had already turned into a sky full of devil smoke. Li Xunfeng's eyes flashed with golden light as he flew at lightning speed into the devil smoke. His heavenly gilded helm was operating at full power, enhancing his speed even further. He reached into the smoke and snatched at something, finally stopping to scan his surroundings with narrowed eyes. Yunli stepped closer and saw the fierce man slowly open his palm, revealing a silver-gray drop of mercury that writhed and spun in his hand, radiating a faintly intoxicating glow. A thin layer of silver light coated the mercury drop, resisting Li Xuanfeng's mana and preserving Helian Changguang's soul. But now that light was gradually fading, growing dimmer and dimmer. Yunli feigned sudden realization, exhaled heavily, and said quietly, "The whole Pill Dao is known for its mystique. As expected, it includes many life-saving spell arts. If not for Brother Xuanfeng's vigilance, this one would have truly escaped." Li Xuanfeng nodded silently. The drop of mercury in his palm suddenly revealed a face. He was high-nosed and deep-eyed, unmistakably Helian Changguang himself. His voice was sorrowful as he said, "Immortal seniors, I have never offended either of you. I merely lingered a few steps too long. Does that warrant my death? Senior Xuanfeng, your junior killed my concubine, took my Dharma artifact, and chased me to ruin and dismemberment. I've not sought revenge, yet now you seek my life. Is this the act of a true and righteous man?" Helian Changguang had pieced together the reason for Li Xuanfeng's murderous intent in just a few seconds. His voice turned mournful, filled with pitiful desperation. Yunli laughed heartily and simply said, "You're a devil head, does killing you need a reason? Man-eaters and blood-drinkers like you deserve death from all." Li Xuanfeng merely tilted his head, gaze shifting away. He didn't reply to Helian Changguang at all. His mana grew brighter and brighter, polishing away the silver sheen on the mercury drop. Crack. Before Helian Changguang could respond again, Li Xuanfeng's radiant mana had surged past all resistance. His soul was instantly annihilated, leaving only the dimly glowing drop of mercury behind. Chapter 839, Taking Action II. Li Xuanfeng's mana hadn't harmed the object at all. He swirled his mana around it once and withdrew it. Li Xuanfeng stared at the drop of mercury lying silently in his hand. He suspected it to be a Dharma artifact, so he channeled his mana through it a few more times, but no Dharma light emerged. Could it be a spirit item? Li Xuanfeng frowned as he tried to determine its origin. The ever-observant Yunli saw his mana flash twice and softly remarked, "I doubt it's a Purple Mansion Realm spirit item. It seems this man's entire cultivation was transformed into a spirit item and condensed into this tiny mercury drop. It's quite a curiosity indeed." His words were clear enough. Li Xuanfeng flipped his hand and stored the item, silently wondering, if this is a Purple Mansion Realm spirit item, perhaps Taoist Master Qiushui could make use of it. If I can use it to earn her goodwill and trade for the Radiant Skystone, that would be ideal. Yunli had recovered Helian Changguang's Dharma artifact, but his storage pouch could no longer be found. The crafty youth had embedded a small spirit array in it so that his sudden death destroyed the pouch, burning away nearly all of its contents. Only a few durable spirit items had fallen into the lake. The two said little and made their way toward the small palace. Yunli quickly passed through the corridor and paused at the main hall's entrance, studying it closely. Though he had confirmed something internally, he still voiced apparent surprise. Fellow Taoist Xuanfeng. This hall still has remnants of a formation. Oh, Li Xuanfeng followed him down and paused at the entrance. Two stone statues sculpted into three-eyed Mount Tio beasts famed for guarding formations and drawing wealth flanked the door. The ancients had favored them as household guardians. What a fine ancient formation. Yunli stopped and pointed to the formation, marveling. "Come take a look quickly. This formation is quite something. It's a rare ancient formation with the Supreme Yin and Supreme Yang as its cores. These two fruition attainments never manifested but also never shifted, so the formation can still function to some extent. The owner of this hall must have been extraordinary." He seemed thoroughly intrigued, speaking at length from the formation's foundational patterns to its yin-yang balance, even touching on the impact of Shangyuan Dao attainment. Li Xuanfeng listened thoughtfully. Perhaps opening this formation will trigger some major change. Yunli is likely stalling on purpose until it's closer to the time we leave the Great Ning Palace, so as to avoid complications. Li Xuanfeng didn't press him, treating it as an opportunity to hear some rare stories. Since Yunli seemed to be making idle conversation, he deliberately asked something obscure. "That's interesting. Do you know how many have attained the fruition of yin and yang today?" Yunli faltered slightly, but had no choice but to answer. The Supreme Yin and Supreme Yang fruitions are very exalted. The last few holders were all immortals. The Supreme Yang once belonged to immortal Yings, and the Supreme Yin to the immortal Lord of Moonlight Origin Mansion. Unfortunately, both disappeared ages ago and have left no traces. Whether they are dead or in seclusion attempting breakthroughs, I'm just a humble cultivator and wouldn't dare speculate. It would only short my lifespan. Better not to say more. As he spoke, Standing idly started to feel awkward. He placed a hand on the formation, seemingly studying its patterns and thinking of ways to break it. His tone was casual. As for Bright Yang and Veiled Yin, fellow Taoist surely knows more about Bright Yang than I do, so I won't elaborate. Veiled Yin has remained vacant ever since its previous bearer was slain by the Wei Emperor, which is what set the current trend of male cultivators vastly outnumbering females. He had spoken too quickly and paused for 2 seconds, as if realizing he had said too much. He hurriedly glossed over the 2 fruition attainments and said in a low voice, Lesser Yang is none other than the Lesser Yang Devil Monarch, Qa Li. The tale of Spleetered Island is known across the world. The Devil Monarch was split into 3 by immortal Yings, which led to the rise of Dragon Monarch Xiang. To this day, Dragon Monarch Xiang still considers immortal Yings his senior. Lesser Yin is even more elusive. Few Dao lineages have even heard of one that bears it. He barely finished his words and noticed Li Xuanfeng was about to ask more. Unease crept in. There were many Purple Mansion realm cultivators watching from outside, many from Golden Core Dao lineages. If he said the wrong thing, it would be troublesome. He made up his mind and quickly patted the formation, saying urgently, Brother Xuanfeng, I've found a way. Not allowing another interruption, he handed the green cauldron to Li Xuanfeng and quickly said, This formation once reached Purple Mansion realm at its peak, but it's decayed over time. Look at this. He pointed at the 8 rays of light at the center of the formation. There were 6 outer ones surrounding 2 inner yin-yang flows. He explained the inner 2 represent Supreme Yin and Supreme Yang fruition, but 2 of the 6 outer lights have failed. What remains are pristine, converging, joy, and zheng. Remove these 4 and we can immediately enter the formation. Li Xuanfeng took a close look. He wasn't well versed in formations, but noticed that Si Yuanli had produced 2 white talismans and placed them in his palm. He glanced at the talismans. They shimmered faintly with multicolored light, about 3 fingers wide and a palm's length. One bore 4 words in green-gray ink, turn pristine into converging. The other was written in pale golden-white script, nearly blending into the paper itself, borrow zheng for joy. The 2 talismans matched the 4 formation aspects perfectly. Si Baxiu's intentions were now plain. It was the moment when hidden knives were drawn. Si Yuanli raised the talismans high, as his slouch vanished and he straightened. His gaze sharpened, all trace of weakness gone, and he spoke in a solemn tone. By the mandate of heaven, zheng is lent to joy as dragon and serpent struggle. Pristine is turned into converging, thus granting access to true law and wondrous divine ability. Though he spoke rapidly, his voice carried solemn weight. It hung in the air for 2 seconds before green-gray and pale gold lights burst from his hands, shooting skyward and exploding in brilliant flashes. Boom! Green raindrops began to fall from above. Li Xuanfeng had prepared in advance, so his mana gathered into a golden shield before him, blocking the sweeping aftermath as he silently stepped back. His eyes opened slightly, golden mana gleaming white. The corridor beneath his feet collapsed, revealing a sheet of deep blue converging water before the main hall. 2 green fish-shaped bells hanging from the eaves jingled, then fell midair, disintegrating into beads of bronze before hitting the ground. The 6 rays of light in the formation flickered. The green pristine and blue converging reversed, while the white joy and golden zheng inverted. The entire formation crumbled like dust in the wind, collapsing without force and dissolving into scattered color. Unlike most broken formations, no shockwave spread, nor did any restrictive power activate. It was as if the formation had never existed, leaving behind only a hollow gleam. Creak. The hall doors swung open with a creak. Si Yuanli, now energetic and unrecognizably spry, leaped inside. His deep voice echoed out, Fellow Taoist Xuanfeng. Take whatever you wish inside, I only want the scroll on the table. But we must leave in 10 seconds. Once the others arrive, escape will be impossible. Chapter 840, I should not enter. His tone was resolute and his eyes were sharp. His sword was lifted high and shed sword essence bright as frost, exuding an ethereal air. No longer the coward from before, white mist rose beneath his feet as he flew into the hall. Li Xuanfeng naturally followed close behind, golden bow glowing as he sped forward. The round grand hall was somewhat empty, with a few square cauldrons placed about. A jade platform radiating brilliant white light stood at the center. The jade platform had 8 corners and was shaped like a blooming lotus. A jade box, etched with intricate golden patterns, gently floated in the air above the platform. The hall alternated between light and shadow. Golden light lit up the ceiling, where talismans hung from red threads at varying heights, swaying and colliding in the gust stirred by the 2 intruders. The highest seat of law glowed dimly. Its armrests were shaped like phoenixes, and the large screen behind bore complex patterns, converging brightly at the center to form one large word, Sima. Not Si, it's Sima. Si Yuanli didn't even glance at the jade platform. He rode the wind straight past it and reached for the tall desk. Sure enough, a scroll lay upon it. It was seemingly ordinary, without a trace of Dharma light. What a lavish grand hall. He stepped right up to it in 2 strides. Li Xuanfeng, as expected, reached for the gold-patterned jade box atop the jade platform. The platform had no real protective measures, only a thin light film covering its aura. Li Xuanfeng simply reached out and grasped it. The gold-patterned jade box was scorching hot. It radiated searing heat as it landed in his hand, a warm breeze brushing across his face. A single gesture allowed Li Xuanfeng to pull down most of the golden talismans in the hall and stuff them into his pouch in one breath. Meanwhile, his spiritual sense slipped into the jade box, where a streak of red-golden brilliance darted back and forth. It scorched his spiritual sense, causing his heart to thump as he wondered, this looks like. Si Yuanli had already retrieved the scroll and was fleeing the hall. Li Xuanfeng, neither careless nor greedy, swiftly followed him back to the entrance. There he spotted a letter and an incense burner on a small table. He grabbed them just in time and stored them away. His spiritual sense was still checking the gold-patterned jade box when a sudden thought struck like lightning, fiery red like gold, darting like light. It must be the supreme Yang Sun essence. The joy stayed in his mind for only a moment before shock struck his heart, and the item in his hand suddenly felt even more scalding. He quickly reviewed everything. Si Yuanli made it sound nice, saying, "Take whatever you want. But a spirit item like the supreme Yang Sun essence isn't something ordinary cultivators can keep. Now we took the jade box, those purple mansion realm cultivators may very well have seen it. If I walk out of Great Ning Palace with this in hand, they'll surely suspect me. Am I not walking into death?" His heart was clear when he said take freely. It was likely only referring to those golden talismans and common items. As for the rest, how could one justify keeping them to oneself? He kept the gold-patterned jade box in hand, since he dared not place it in his storage pouch. Doing so would surely raise suspicion upon exit. Though scalding hot, Li Xuanfeng calmly raised the spirit item and handed it to Si Yuanli, speaking in a steady tone. "This rightfully belongs to your esteemed family. I, Xuanfeng, dare not keep it for myself." Si Yuanli rode the wind at full speed, scanning both sides carefully. He paused in surprise when he heard these words. As he reached out to take it back, the scorching heat met his hand and his spiritual sense jolted. He immediately understood. Quickly stowed it away, asking no questions. Instead, he solemnly said, "Once we are out of Great Ning Palace, I will explain everything in detail." The implications of his words only struck Si Yuanli once they left his lips. He considered explaining further, but felt it would only make matters worse. Li Xuanfeng, however, instantly understood. So it really is the Sima family. Si Yuanli had moved with practiced ease the whole time, and Li Xuanfeng had already harbored suspicions. His doubts had only increased once Si Yuanli had produced the exact 2 talismans needed. Though Si Boxiu was a purple mansion realm cultivator, the sky was filled with many others of that realm, especially Maha and the Merciful One. Who among them couldn't see through Si Boxiu's plans? Why then was Si Yuanli the only one to have come all this way in disguise? Putting it all together with the Sima character in the hall, Li Xuanfeng realized this grand hall belonged to the Si family. When he asked casually, Si Yuanli wasn't paying attention and responded without thought, effectively confirming it. So the Si family really does hail from Ning State, or at least has a branch there. In any case, Si Yuanli played dumb the whole way just to achieve his goal. They split up the moment they entered the grotto heaven. It seems even Si Boxiu might be wary of the Kai family. If Li Xuanfeng could see this much, how could the Purple Mansion realm cultivators high above, let alone the Mahas, miss it? Now that Si Yuanli had retrieved the item, he no longer bothered to conceal anything and said solemnly, "Though I feigned ignorance all the way, many northern cultivators are already aware of the southern situation. They are guarding against my clan. It will come sooner than expected." Just as he finished speaking, black demonic mist rose from the lake beneath them and chased after the two. These devil cultivators had seemingly intended to enter the hall but suddenly changed direction and veered toward them instead. Li Xuanfeng turned with bow in hand, firing 2 arrows in rapid succession like shooting stars. They streaked into the demonic mist, and golden light burst beneath his feet, forcing several of the devils back. While Li Xuanfeng blocked the pursuing devil cultivators, Si Yuanli also drew his sword and soared into the sky. His stance was entirely different from before. Though he was not widely known, he had cultivated at the peak of the Foundation establishment realm for years. His longsword was elegant and powerful, its light gathering into true sword essence. A flick of his sword in midair struck down a crimson blade with a sudden bang. He reversed his grip and flung out a burst of bright sword essence, speaking in a low voice, "Brother Xuanfeng, be careful." Li Xuanfeng remained composed. The golden string in his hand quivered, releasing a burst of golden light that shot down a demon in the mist. Si Yuanli muffled a grunt as he muttered, "Brother Xuanfeng." Just as he spoke, 4 gold-robed master monks appeared around them, each taking a position at one of the cardinal directions. Their expressions were calm and their chests half bared. They each had a different weapon: saber, spear, staff, and cudgel, and they spoke in unison. "You 2 benefactors have grown far too greedy." The massive cauldron floated beside Si Yuanli, glowing with a mesmerizing blue radiance. The 2 of them had taken the most precious items from the cave dwelling, and the 2 sky-reaching talismans had caused such a stir that all of Great Ning Palace had noticed. They were now obvious targets. Li Xuanfeng's gaze swept across the four identical monks. In the distance, several more clouds of demonic mist were rushing toward them. Sensing danger, he raised his golden bow again, a crimson gold arrow leaping into place. Si Yuanli also knew they couldn't afford to be surrounded by these four. He activated his immortal foundation mana, and his green robe turned white. Snowflakes fell around him as he flicked his sword and said coldly, "North." Sword light burst from his blade, transforming into ethereal mist that fell like white snow. Though it appeared otherworldly in light, each flake was deadly. It was the Sea family's pine white full essence sword art. The crimson gold glow also vanished from Li Xuanfeng's bowstring. A piercing whine echoed through the air as the northern Buddhist cultivator's expression darkened. He raised his long staff high while the other three slowly closed their eyes, channeling their golden light toward him. Ha! Just as he shouted, he was immediately shredded by the blizzard of sword light. The monk had only just opened his eyes when a massive gash was torn through his throat. Astral chi mixed with crimson gold light sprayed forth, nearly ripping his body apart.